Hey guys, this is Frank Yecker, and you're listening to Submission Radio.
Hey, this is Rich Franklin.
What's up, everybody? This is Chris Lieben. This is Diego Sanchez. Randy Couture.
Alistair Overeem.
Hi, this is Stephen Bonner.
This is Don Fry.
Hey, I'm Phil, Mr. Wonderful Davis.
TJ Dillashaw.
You're listening to Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
You're listening to Submission Radio.
Welcome to the end of year episode of Submission Radio. It's episode 148, Wednesday, the 20th of December. Dennis Kraft here with Kasper Ozolowski during some Christmas cheer as we go into the end of 2017. Been a great year, Cass.
It's been a fantastic year. Eggnog is around the corner. A lot of Christmas cooking, Christmas food. I can practically taste it and smell it bellowing from the kitchen. It's just around the corner. It's going to be so good. But there's a lot of sexy things around the corner. One of them is, of course, the guest list for this episode, but also UFC 219. It is right around the corner. I can't wait. It is a tremendous card with some fantastic, exciting matchups, and we will be previewing the card all throughout this show. We have John Morgan jumping on the program. John Morgan's always down for a good time. We'll be going through majority of the card, the big fights on the card, talking about the undercard, of course the main event, the co-main event, getting all kinds of predictions and analysis on all things UFC 219, so I'm very excited about that. Also, John will be giving his thoughts on Javier Dos Anjos' victory over the weekend over Robbie Lawler, so there's that to look forward to. We have Javier Mendez, the head coach of AKA, of course, the home of Khabib Nurmagomedov, so he's jumping on the program to talk about UFC 219, this Edson Barboza fight. Also want to pick his brain about other things like Cain Velasquez, Daniel Cormier, Luke Rockhold's comments about AKA not being what it used to be, so there's that. Tommy Toehold will be bringing a awesome, sexy preview to the show, as he is always been known for, so I'm looking forward to that. Kenny Florian returning to Submission Radio. I want to talk to him and pick his brain about some of the big things happening in the world of MMA. Obviously, he had a little back and forth with Colby Covington over Twitter, so we're going to talk about that. Javier Dos Anjos, GSP, what's next for him? Maybe slide in a couple of McGregor questions and get Kenny's predictions for UFC 219. And then Luke Thomas will be rounding off the show with some fantastic breakdowns and more detailed analysis of the two main fights from UFC 219. Obviously, Cris Cyborg versus Holm and Khabib Nurmagomedov versus Edson Barboza. There's a lot to discuss, a lot to dissect, a lot to talk about, and it's a sexy show, isn't it, Dennis?
It's sexy, it's spicy, it's all of the above. And also, guys, if you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Submission Radio AU, we will have a fun little exclusive interview with Mark Hunt on there. It's separate to the episode. We didn't really want to muddle things up too much because the focus is UFC 219 here, but it's a very fun chat. I think you guys will enjoy it, so jump on and have a listen. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure you do, because you may miss out on this interview. It's not going to be up on the usual channels like iTunes or Stitcher or TuneIn or Podcast One. So make sure you jump on the channel so you do not miss out, because it's a lot of fun talking to Mark Hunt. And also, stick around to the end of the show to hear me and Kasper give our predictions for the co-main and main event of UFC 219, and also reflect on 2017 as a whole, because it's been a great year for us. It'll be nice to kind of sit back and have a bit of a chat, Kasper, about this year, what it's meant for us, talk a little bit about the show and the listeners and all that good stuff. So make sure to stick around to the end of the episode to hear that. We can't wait to sort of just lay back and just talk about the year that has
real
been,
talk.
Guys. Real talk, that's right.
Well, like a couple of gangsters. So there'll be some nice real talk at the end of the episode. It is the last show for the year, but the show will be back. We're coming back on January 17th. That is, of course, in 2018, so it's going to be the 17th over in the States and January 18th. That's a Thursday over here in Australia. Just a couple of weeks to, I guess, decompress, do Christmas, do New Year's, spend some time with our families. They don't know what we look like anymore because we never see them because we're doing the show. So yeah, we can unveil our bearded selves to our families for a few days, and then we'll be back. In the meantime, don't forget to check us out on Twitter at SubmissionAUS, on Facebook, facebook.com/SubmissionRadioAU. And I think that's pretty much it. Drop some iTunes reviews. That's pretty much all the housekeeping. In the meantime, strap yourselves in. A lot of fun, a lot of people to talk to. John Morgan first, Javier Mendez, then Tommy Toehold, then Kenny Florian, Luke Thomas. No idea what's going to happen, but I'm excited. And Dennis, perfect timing, because I believe the first guest is on the line, and you're about to introduce him.
All right, guys, our next guest is the silky smooth voice that leads every press conference, delivers impressive coverage for every event, and orders the best beers. We're, of course, talking about the man behind the Smash Hit podcast, the MMA Roadshow, and MMA Junkie. He's a globetrotter, the Indiana Jones of MMA. John Morgan, welcome back to Submission Rate. It's great to have you, man.
Yeah, man, always a pleasure talking to you fellas.
And as always, of course, you come down just for the intro. So just to
I feel like
make
the
it clear.
intro. I feel like you didn't really react to that intro the way you should have.
Nah.
Well, you know, I mean, you kind of
Could be
stumbled
the end
through
of
it a
a
little
nice
bit
intro
there.
song.
I was trying to let you slide through it because you kind of stumbled there at the end, so I didn't want to bring too much attention to it. I was trying to let you off the hook gently.
Yeah, what a faux pas on our end. Now we've just brought even more attention to it. But anyway, it's
How dare you let us off the hook gently? You keep us on the hook violently where we belong, John.
It's great to have you back, man. There's obviously a lot to talk about when it comes to UFC 219, which is what we've got you here for. But let's acknowledge the big RDA victory from this weekend. It was obviously a massive feather in RDA's cap. What did you think of this performance?
Really, really impressed by the performance, to be honest with you. You know, I think the initial thing that some folks might do is say, well, I mean, Robbie Lawler was obviously hobbled by the end of the fight and maybe take something away from Rafael dos Anjos. And I really think that's a dangerous thing to do. I think that's just not giving RDA enough credit. Man, the guy is dangerous, and he's legit at 170 pounds. I was a little concerned about his move up to welterweight, but, you know, much like I was concerned about Rob Whittaker moving up a division, I have proven completely wrong about RDA. And I tell you what, man, RDA and Woodley's the fight I want to see now. I like Covington, and I appreciate him taking his shot, and I like his shtick and everything he does. But with that performance, man, RDA Woodley's the fight I want to see.
Because we're going to ask you about that next. I mean, Covington, we saw the old boomerang controversy down here in Sydney. This is a guy that's been building a lot of steam. What do you think draws the more attention, the Covington-Woodley fight, or do you think RDA after this performance sort of seals the deal?
Well, man, I'll tell you what, that's a good question, though, when you talk about what brings attention. I mean, I don't know if you guys saw the U.S. ratings for the show, but they weren't great. And I can tell you, you know, as a website operator, I mean, RDA isn't necessarily the biggest draw. I mean, our traffic wasn't phenomenal for the event. So, you know, Covington, I do feel like some people are kind of tiring of Covington a little bit. You know, I mean, it's one thing to be hated. I mean, it's nice to have villains, right? The Chael Sonnen, and hell, even Conor McGregor's a villain to some people now. It's nice to have that, but I almost feel like he's gone a little too far. But I can't tell you, when we post stuff about Covington, it still clicks. It still moves the needle. So that's an interesting question, because to me, Covington Woodley might do better. It would certainly have a lot more pre-fight buildup. There would certainly be a lot more talk. There would be a lot more back and forth. So there'd be a ton of stories. I don't know if it would burn the viewer out or not, but I think there would be more to talk about. But just from a quality perspective, man, I think Rafael dos Anjos, what he's been able to do, the fact that he's a former champion, the fact that he would be trying to make history as the first Brazilian two-division champion, only a handful of two-division champions have existed before. I like that matchup, but I do feel like Colby deserves a number one contender fight. I mean, it's funny, right before we start talking, I'm actually working on our rankings at MMA Junkie right now, and we still got Colby Covington ranked ahead of Rafael dos Anjos in our welterweight rankings. So if you're going straight by rankings, maybe you do go Covington. And if you're going straight by fan interest and what's going to generate the most discussion and traffic, maybe it is Covington. But man, after that performance, I don't know. I really, the fight I want to see is RDA.
I wonder if that would impact on Woodley's decision, given, like you mentioned, that RDA doesn't necessarily, quote unquote, move the needle. But while we're talking about Woodley, obviously, were you surprised that he went for this surgery? And is there any scenario where you see, potentially GSP challenging for the title next, and sort of RDA and Covington being sidelined for the moment?
Man, nothing would surprise me right now. I mean, this whole scenario has played out just the way we thought it would, right? With George St. Pierre coming in and winning the title and then walking away. I mean, some respect to George St. Pierre for getting it done quickly, at least, and not, lingering things out. But yeah, I don't know. I could maybe see it happen. Anything is possible right now. You still got Conor McGregor in the mix. Who knows? I mean, GSP, Conor McGregor, maybe that's a fight that happens. Anything can happen when it comes to those two. Those two operate above the rankings. They operate above the UFC. They kind of live in their own little world.
All right. Well, let's talk about things that we do know, and that's UFC 219, because there's some really fun fights here. And, of course, one of the big fights that we want to kick the discussion off with is New Zealand's own Dan Hooker taking on Mark DeCasey in a fight many fans down here can't wait to watch. Now, Hooker, for a long time, has been a bit of a star down in New Zealand, something that a lot of the people overseas, a lot of fans in America may not know. He's a bit of a star down there. So do you think he could get it done and over such a tough opponent like DeCasey?
I love this fight. I really do. I was just kind of looking at the card myself, trying to map out our coverage for next week and how we're going to do things. And I definitely want to make sure we talk to both Hooker and Diakiese. I'm with you guys. This is one of the fights I'm really looking forward to on the card. I've been a big Dan Hooker fan since he came into the UFC. I think, first of all, he's a really intelligent guy. He's a well-spoken guy. He does a lot of breakdowns and video stuff on his YouTube channel, which I think is always fun to watch. He's fun to just talk the fight game with. He's a cerebral guy. And he's a tough dude, man. He's the real deal. He's fought some tough competition. The losses to Blanco, to Yair Rodriguez, to Jason Knight. I mean, these are all tough guys. But man, how good did he look against Ross Pearson, moving up a division and just having that fantastic knockout there? So I like it. Mark Diakiese, still raw in my opinion. I mean, he's fought some tough guys, but of course, lost a decision the last time out. So I think he's shown, a little bit of veteran savvy, a little bit of gamesmanship. I mean, if you can keep yourself out of that kickboxing range and you can deal with that just incredible athleticism that he has, that incredible creative striking style that he has, yeah, he can be beaten. Once somebody has that first loss on the record, there's a little blueprint there and you feel like you can do something. So, on the surface, I'd probably lean towards Diakiese a little bit. But I'm really looking forward to this fight because I think Dan Hooker, if you just look at him as here's a 14-7 career record guy, you go, oh, well, he's going to get mopped up by this Diakiese guy. But I think that takes a lot away from what Dan Hooker is capable of. So really looking forward to this fight.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a couple of big returns at UFC 219. Obviously, Khabib being one of them, but the other one is Carlos Condit. He steps back in the octagon, and he last fought over a year ago, but it actually feels like we haven't seen him for so much longer. What are you expecting from the Condit that's returning at UFC 219 after such a long time?
Yeah, man, it does feel like so much longer than a year. And what I really remember about that loss to Damian Maia is just how defeated Carlos Condit seemed. Just his overall attitude. And I mean, gosh, it was crazy. It was like he had just completely lost a passion for the game, lost a passion for the sport. And as you guys well know, I mean, this is not the type of sport you want to be in if you're not in it 100%. Now, the fact that he took a long time away, I think that's a good thing. Let himself rest a little bit, let his mind heal, let his body heal. And I think that if he's on point, I mean, if this is vintage Carlos Condit, and he's the guy's still only 33 years old. So, I mean, if this is vintage Carlos Condit, then yeah, I think he should beat Neil Magny. But Neil Magny is the perennial overachiever, right? I mean, the guy that was on the verge of being cut back in 2013, and now he's a stalwart of the division, and he's somebody you can count on for fun fights. And if you're not in peak form, Neil Magny will take advantage. So I'm going to assume that if Carlos Condit is stepping back in there, because from what I understand, Carlos Condit doesn't need to fight if he doesn't want to. Financially, he's okay. I know he comes from a good family as well, and from what I understand, he's set himself up pretty well. So he's not fighting because he needs the money. He's fighting because he wants to continue competing. That to me is a good sign. So I'm going to assume that he's operating 100%, and I'm going to say Carlos Condit gets this done. But I will say if we see glimpses of that Carlos Condit against Damian Maia, where it just didn't seem like his head was there, it could be a rough night for him.
And I guess a lot of people are wondering, because Condit has been so, I suppose, devastating in the division previously, where this 2017 version of Condit kind of slots in when it comes to the division. If he does have a dominant win over Magny, are you expecting Condit to maybe even have one last sort of title run in the division?
I think he could, just based on name value alone. I mean, right, the UFC has got to make the biggest fights available. And, you start talking about, Carlos Condit's name. It's well respected. Now, I don't know that it's necessarily, a superstar in the sport, but certainly, I mean, the hardcore fans, of course, love watching Carlos Condit fight because he is so fun. And I think even the casuals know. I mean, the guy, he has fought on Big Fox. He has fought on big pay-per-views. He has been in title fights. You've got a history with the Nick Diaz's of the world, the George St. Pierre, Johnny. I mean, so he's been there. He's done that. I think he's been around enough that you could sell him in a big fight. So that could help him. But, I mean, let's be honest. I mean, the guy's not on a good run right now. I mean, the peak Carlos Condit in terms of wins, you got to go all the way back to 2011, 2012. So, I think there's a lot of guys that have spent time coming up the division that I think would feel slighted if he jumped in front of him. So, on name recognition, yeah, I don't know if he can get all the way to a title run with the folks that are in front of him right now.
I agree with you 100%. Moving up the card, obviously, Cynthia Calvillo takes on former champ Carla Esparza. And for Cynthia, Carla's a really good test as a veteran who's sort of seen it all. And for Esparza, a potential win over Cynthia gives her a major step towards building a case for another title shot. How do you see this one playing out, John? Because a lot of people sort of seeing this as tailor-made to sort of push Cynthia.
You hate to say that. I mean, anybody of Carla Esparza's level, you hate to say that it's tailor-made just to set her up. And listen, Carla surprised me a little. I think Marina Moroz, who she beat last time out, is a little bit of an underrated fighter. You know, probably a lot of people don't know the name, but I think she's got legitimate talent. And heck, Juliana Lima for that regard as well. But yeah, Calvillo, how fun is she, right? I mean, amazing what she's been able to do in such a short period of time. I mean, made her professional debut in August 2016. That's crazy. I mean, so we're talking a year and a half, and now she's on the main card of the year-end show, and you're talking about her being a legit contender. So, I don't know. You look at the odds makers, and they've got Calvillo as a huge favorite, and I understand why. I mean, she's legitimate. Her grappling skills are fun. Her tenacity and her striking. I mean, she's a tough cookie. There's no doubt about it. Wow. Cookie and then your Cookie Monster. But then you've got the Cookie Monster on the other side. So I think this is a stiff test. I think you're right to lean towards Calvillo, but I always worry about that one fight where somebody, it's that one step up where everybody takes that one step where we're like, oh, okay, hold on, I wasn't quite ready just yet. Now I see what I'm ready for. Now I know what the challenges are, and I wonder if this could be one of those slip-up moments for Cynthia Calvillo.
And it could be a perfect partnership for Sesame Street. I mean, if they ever embrace cage fighting for the children, I think that would be a perfect candidate to do a few crossovers there. And another fight that fans were really excited for was Jimmy Rivera versus Dominic Cruz. However, Cruz had to pull out with an injury. Lineker now replaces him. Now, Rivera is on a run, only losing his second fight in 2008 and holding wins over some big names like Faber and Almeida, 5 back-to-back wins in the UFC. Do you think he'll be able to continue his winning streak against Lineker, who's super tough?
I do. I think Rivera is the real deal. So I mean, I like Lineker stepping in here. If you're looking for a test that's equal to that of Cruz, that may be a little. I mean, Cruz is one of the best to ever do it. But I mean, Lineker is just so fun. I mean, he comes in there and he throws down. He's got a fan friendly style. But yeah, I do wonder. I mean, Rivera's got a gas tank. If this was a 5-rounder, I'd definitely lean towards Jimmy Rivera. But they've only got 3 rounds to get it done. But yeah, I think Rivera is the real deal. I think he is, a future title challenger, and I do believe that he's got enough to get it done here. I'm so impressed. I've been impressed with Jimmy Rivera before he was in the UFC. I've been impressed by what he's done in the UFC. And as much as I like John Lineker, man, I think Jimmy Rivera, just his wrestling and his pace is going to be a little bit problematic for John Lineker. I mean, his striking's not bad either. He can box. He's got good. You definitely don't want to stand toe to toe in the pocket and just trade shots on the chin and see who falls with John Lineker, because he's a tough dude. But if you can wrestle, you can transition, and you can keep the pace high, I think you can wear down John Lineker. I mean, Lineker was fading last time out, right? I mean, he had a great win over Chito Vera, who I'm a big fan of as well, but he was fading in the third. And I think Rivera is going to press the pace even for. I saw Chito just the other week in Fresno, and he was like, "Man, I cannot believe I didn't press faster and press harder." And that's what Jimmy Rivera will do.
I feel like it's a bit of a rough one, though, for Rivera, right? Because you mentioned how he's a future title contender and against Dominic Cruz. If he had beaten Dominic Cruz, I think that would make a huge case for a title shot against TJ Dillashaw. And now sort of, it's fighting a guy that Dillashaw already beat, even though Lineker's tough. And it looks like Dillashaw wants this fight against Demetrius Johnson. Kind of, what's Rivera really fighting for here?
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, it's a definite disappointment, but I think it's the best name available. I mean, knowing that Cruz isn't available, and you could sit out. I mean, the flip side to me, because I just don't think there's another name. If you're Rivera, you could say, you know what, that was my ticket to a title shot. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to sit and I'm going to wait on Dominic Cruz. Well, no offense to Dominic Cruz, but we know how dangerous of a decision that would be because of the health concerns he's had over and over and over. So if you've got to pick a name, and a name that's ready right now, I think this was the name. I mean, maybe. Because even like a guy like Marlon Moraes, who's as dangerous as he is, I think he's still less of a proven commodity in the UFC. So I think you could still have those same questions. Like, let's say Rivera had faced Marlon Moraes and had been able to find a way to victory. It would be very easy for people to say, yeah, but you know what, Marlon, he wasn't the real deal anyway. He was just racking up wins in World Series of Fighting. This isn't going to get done. John Lineker, to me, is a proven commodity. And to me, if you've got to pick a name that was available, this is the best name available. And I think his motivation will still be high because this is a guy that people know.
Talk to us about the co-main event fight between Khabib and Barboza. I mean, in terms of matchups, was this the fight that you were hoping for Khabib's return fight? And how do you see this one playing out?
I mean, of course, I was hoping for Khabib versus Tony Ferguson. But right now, I mean, based on the way things happened since they were supposed to fight, yeah, I absolutely love this fight. I think it's a great clash of styles. I mean, you've got, the quintessential striker versus grappler at their base. Of course, both of them are well-rounded at this point. You can't be at the top level and not have all the skills, of course. But at the end of the day, I mean, we love Khabib's grappling and we love Edson striking. So, I think this is a phenomenal fight. I think Khabib Nurmagomedov is my pick here. I do, obviously you don't get to 24-0 for no reason. The guy's wrestling is incredible. You do wonder, I guess, about weight, but he just did a media lunch in Los Angeles, and he wouldn't reveal his weight, but just watching the videos, he looked like he's on track. If you're just giving him the eyeball test, he looks a little bit thinner than he normally does, kind of coming into a fight week. So it looks like he's on track in terms of weight. Know that he wants that title shot. He's got potential big things for him. Russia is a market the UFC wants to go to. I mean, there's just so much on the line for Khabib Nurmagomedov, and if you talk to people that are with him in the gym, I mean, they still remain just as high on him today as they ever have. I love Edson Barboza. Man, he has looked fantastic in this winning streak that he's on right now. I just think Khabib is a cut above. I think he's just one level above, and especially when you talk about the wrestling, I think that potentially is going to give Edson Barboza some fits.
And you mentioned the stakes. There's obviously a huge amount on the line for Khabib. Even from a sort of fan and PR perspective, I feel like he sort of needs this big win to erase the whole disaster of UFC 209. From the air, and obviously losing to Barboza would derail his opportunity to fight for the title. But if he does beat Edson, like you're sort of predicting, John, do you believe he's in the running at all to fight Conor McGregor? Just purely from the perspective of, Ferguson obviously recovering from that elbow surgery. Do you see some way where the UFC, who, they've kind of shown that they're sometimes they're not really willing to wait. In the case of GSP and Michael Bisping, Robert Whittaker was injured. He was the interim champ. They went with a fight anyway. Do you see any situation where we might even see Khabib versus Conor McGregor in some capacity?
It's interesting. When I heard Ferguson was getting surgery, the one thing I always go back to anytime Tony Ferguson makes a decision is the fact that Tony and Conor have the same manager. And it just makes you wonder, like, what does he know that we don't? That he goes, you know what? I know I've got this potential title fight on the line, but you know what? Now is the right time for me to get a surgery. What does he know that we don't? So I have a feeling that they know either a GSP fight might be possible for Conor. It doesn't sound like boxing is going to happen, which thank God. Who wanted to see him fight Pacquiao? Man, come on, get out of here. Or at least maybe that we know that Conor's not going to be ready until late enough in the year that Ferguson could recover. So, again, that's all speculation. I'm not, and it wouldn't be shady. I'm not trying to say that Audie or his team at Paradigm would be doing anything, untoward by making a decision like that. But hey, if you have inside information on the guy you want to fight, and it's going to allow you to recover, then why not take advantage of it? So I just don't see Khabib jumping the line. I really don't. But I do think that fight would be massive, man. It's the Russian market is I think it's going to be a huge one for the UFC. It's funny. Sometimes we'll post some stuff on the website about, whether it be Khabib or whether it be, some regional Russian promotions or fighters, and the traffic we get is insane. It comes from Russia. You know what I mean? Like it's nuts. I mean, it's really a growing market. So, I think that would be a big opportunity, but I just don't see him jumping the line in front of Tony Ferguson. I don't think that would be possible, but it's funny, man. What you said about the stakes is so true, because of course a loss would knock him down the rankings a little bit. But when you add in kind of the public sentiment that has been seen to swaying against Khabib Nurmagomedov, yeah, I think he would fall down a long way in the court of public opinion. So high stakes here for Khabib.
And we have to touch on the main event. Obviously, a massive matchup between Holm and Cyborg. A lot of people are sort of looking at this as possibly one of the biggest women's fights in history of MMA. Would you say it's at that level, or is it really not quite at that kind of Ronda Rousey fight level at the moment for you, John?
It's not quite at that Ronda Rousey fight level, but that's just because, that was just the big mainstream. I mean, she was the biggest star before Conor, right? So, I mean, it's not in terms of, quality level competition. Hell yeah. I mean, these are two of the best women strikers ever to do it in the female side of the game. So from a technical perspective, from a sporting perspective, absolutely, this is amazing. And of course, Holly does still have a little bit of that rub from being the girl that knocked out Ronda Rousey. Now, Holly's had some losses, so that took her reputation down a little bit. Amanda Nunes knocked out Ronda Rousey, so that kind of took a little bit of the shine off that win. But she still has that mainstream appeal. But yeah, I would say it's not quite at that level. But, that's like saying, a Tony Ferguson versus Khabib Nurmagomedov fight would not be at a Conor McGregor level. You know what I mean? Technically speaking, hell yeah, it's an amazing fight. It's just not quite that mainstream stardom. So not quite, but I do love the fight itself. I think this was, the fight that the UFC's been trying to make for a while, and I think this is the best fight they could make.
It's a very intriguing fight as well in terms of how it's going to play up. I mean, I feel like there are still questions surrounding Holly Holm. I mean, obviously that Bethe Correia fight, it was a devastating finish, but up until that point, I think it sort of raised almost more questions than answered. And then with Cyborg, a lot of people are wondering, what sort of game plan she'll choose. She's been pretty patient in her UFC run, even though she's got a lot of fairly quick finishes. People are wondering, how the later rounds are going to look, if Holly Holm will sort of look to counter and play the Matador. How do you see this fight playing out, John? And if you had to give a cheeky prediction, who are you leaning towards?
Yeah, what you're saying is so true. I mean, that's what makes it so intriguing is the clash of styles, right? It's funny that Bethe Correia fight over in Singapore, I was there cage side, and, the crowd was starting to boo, and then all of a sudden the big knockout. And afterwards, I thought Holly might be like, yeah, I was a little disappointed. And she was like, nope, fight went exactly what I wanted. Like, our whole goal was to stay clean, for every move to be perfect, every shot to be perfect, to only take the ones that matter. It's like, well, that'd be a good warm-up for Cyborg. I mean, you're not seeing the same level of output, but you definitely don't want to get touched even once by Cyborg. So it was interesting how she was pretty satisfied with the result, even though it wasn't exciting. And what you said is true as well. I mean, Cyborg, we know it's all early, right? It's that early aggression. Now, she is starting to pace herself a little bit more. You can tell that as she's getting to the higher level, she's not coming out as just this, like, aggressive Vanderlei Silva-esque berserker. She's actually trying to pick her shots and find a rhythm and understand that she can't just wear it out all early if 25 minutes are going to come. But you do wonder, can she go 25 minutes, with the frame that she carries, the power that she throws with? If you're looking for somebody to beat Cyborg, what do you want? You probably want to be able to strike. You probably want to be able to manage the distance well. And, of course, Holly can do that. But Holly's not a big knockout artist either. Yes, that was a devastating knockout, but she hasn't always been that way. It's more of a combination of points and that sort of thing. So I'm still going to lean towards Cyborg. I do think that right now she's the pound for pound best in the world. I do think that she's just always been a cut above on the feet, especially. I think Holly is the right style, the right game plan to make this interesting, and there are a lot of real intriguing points about this, but Cyborg is just something special, man. You hate to use the Mike Tyson comparisons because that's a loaded comparison there, but it is so fun. I mean, it's kind of one of those things that it doesn't even matter who's on the other side when Cyborg is fighting. Like, you just want to tune in because she's so devastating and so fun to watch. So I'm not ruling Holly Holm out. I do think she definitely has world-class striking skills, and that's imperative, but man, Cyborg is something special.
And as we wrap up, John, we got to get the goss from the MMA Junkie Christmas party. Have you guys had it yet? What are the plans if you haven't? And has Mike Bond hit the eggnog a little bit too hard this year?
I tell you what, man. We live all over the North America and then hell South America as well, Fernando Praches. So we don't get together very often, but we all just kind of in our own ways hit the eggnog pretty hard and try to enjoy this week. I'm just ready to enjoy a few days at home with the family, and then like I said, we'll wrap this year up with hopefully a great fight card. Because I'm telling you, this fight card does look fun, start to finish, man. A lot of good fights, and then we'll just get the nuttiness going again right into 2018.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, you're one of the hardest working men in the business, and I think if anyone deserves some, a rare weekend off with a bit of eggnog and some family time, it's definitely you. Of course, follow the guy on Twitter at MMA Junkie John. Of course, his coverage for UFC 219 will be excellent, so make sure to go on MMAJunkie.com. And of course, if you have the time, check out MMA Roadshow, a phenomenal podcast, and a lot of great guests on there as well. As always, really appreciate the time, John. Thank you so much.
Always a pleasure, fellas.
This is Chael Sonnen, and you are listening to Submission Radio.
All right, guys. Our next guest is the man behind San Jose's very own powerhouse gym, a.k.a. such all-star fighters as Daniel Cormier, Khabib Nurmagomedov, Cain Velasquez, and, of course, Luke Rockhold, and many, many more. He is a former world champion kickboxer himself. He is Javier Mendez. Javier, welcome back to the program. How are you today?
Good. Thanks for having me on, you guys.
Yeah, we love having you on, and we're just 2 weeks away from UFC 219, which is, of course, the big, long-awaited return of Khabib Nurmagomedov, where he takes on Edson Barboza. We know you're his coach, but after all the hurdles he had to overcome in this past year, how excited are you to finally see him back in action?
I don't know if I would say excited. I guess the word for me would be more anxious for him to go out there and perform. He's ready. He's came in camp lighter than he ever has. He's lighter now than he ever has. His nutrition, he started like almost 50 days out, so everything is better. His striking is better. His grappling is better. I'm anxious to watch him perform and see if he can put it all together against a very dangerous opponent.
It's an interesting response because usually you will ask a coach and they won't be so honest about it. Are there any aspects about his health or anything from the previous weight cut? We know he was dealing with some health issues from that also kind of makes you a little bit anxious, or is it just primarily what you mentioned just before?
No, it's just what I mentioned. The last time people were making too much of his weight cut, talking about it was disastrous, he wasn't going to make weight. Just because his opponent says he wasn't going to make weight and made fun of it, he was on schedule to make weight. His body just failed at him. It's like how many times you see a fighter get ready for a fight and all of a sudden kidney stones or something happens to him. Look, it does have a lot to do with losing weight that causes these problems, but it wasn't that he wasn't going to make weight. He was going to make weight. He wasn't over anything. He was just like where he normally is. Just the thing is with Khabib, he doesn't like to say anything about it, and he still won't say anything about it. So, and then there's that tiramisu bullshit. He didn't eat that stuff. He never ate that stuff. He's with a bunch of fighters that aren't in camp and not fighting, so they're not allowed to eat, because he's not allowed to eat. It's like stupid,
Yeah.
Too much has been made up of something that wasn't even there.
Totally understandable. I'm just wondering, do you know what kind of weight he's on at the moment? Because there were some loose reports recently that he's apparently at 170 already. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, that's about right.
Wow.
I mean, there's been a little bit of controversy just to move past this weight thing. A lot of people wondering if his future will remain at lightweight. Are you confident that Khabib would stay at that weight class, or would you like to see him move up eventually?
No, 100%. I mean, first thing first, he needs to capture that UFC title and defend it, and then see what happens from there on what he wants to do, what him and his father want to do, So it's all going to depend on that, but he's first got to get that title before any decision can be made on what the future holds.
We mentioned before some of the obviously hurdles that he went through. He hasn't had a fight yet this year. The Tony one didn't come through, and then he had those health issues. But all things aside, it's almost like the sort of title picture moved on without him temporarily. And you mentioned that title now. How important would you say this fight is for not only his career, but to sort of really reinstate himself as a title contender in a couple of weeks?
Well, because of what the person is fighting, it means it's very, very important, because the winner of this fight is going to be arguably the number one challenger for the title, whether it be Tony or whoever Tony ends up fighting. So no, definitely this is a very, very important fight for both of them, and for me, of course, it's more important because I'm his coach. So yeah, no, it's a very important fight.
So he's facing Edson Barboza, but there has been some news that apparently the UFC also offered him Tony Ferguson. I mean, is that true?
Yeah, 100% true. They were offered Tony, but hey, look, listen, Tony, when he was going for that gold, he was saying, "I'll defend, I'll do this, I'll do that." But reality is, he's the fighter, but he's got businessmen to manage him, and they're doing a good job doing that. And it comes down to, once you reach that mountaintop, which Tony has, then it's about making the wise choices that make the most sense, And let's face it, about with Khabib versus about with Conor, which was what Dana was talking about, everybody was talking about. If you're in Tony's shoes, what would you do? You're not gonna just fight anybody that comes up and whatever. No, he's gonna try to get himself in that sweepstake situation with Conor, and you can't blame him. I don't blame him. It is what it is, But so obviously when the guys talk the talk, I've yet to see many fighters actually walk the walk, And Khabib so far is talk the talk, walk the walk, but we'll see what happens when he becomes champion. If his business managers and people that have his ear tell him, hey, wait for the money fight, wait for the money fight. I mean, in all history, you guys, it's always been that way. And what's going to change? Nothing's going to change. It's always going to be the same. It's always going to be about who is going to give you the most money. Why is Conor McGregor doing what he's doing? Same reason. He's made what he needs to do. Now Conor is waiting for the best payday and what his desire is, and what gets him excited to compete, and he's doing the right business. Conor's been doing the right business right from the get-go.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. What do you think about Edson as the opponent now? And obviously him as a fighter in general and the streak that he's put on recently since, he's had almost a bit of a resurgence at lightweight, has Edson?
He's extremely dangerous, striker, extremely hard to take down, a good kicker, good puncher, great conditioning, super fast, and a 3-fight win streak. I mean, man, he's very dangerous. So we got our work cut out for us, but we're ready. Khabib's ready. He knows what's ahead of him, and we know what we got in front of us, and he's going to go out and prove his dominance.
I guess one of the reasons why a lot of people think this matchup is dangerous is because Edson is just such a beast when it comes to striking, and people still remember the issues that Khabib had with Michael Johnson in that fight when it came down to the striking. So what have you guys been working on in terms of getting him ready to, I suppose, stand with Edson? And for all those fans who believe Edson's going to have a major strength over him in the striking area, what's your response to them?
Well, I mean, if you watch that Michael Johnson fight with Khabib, Michael Johnson was only involved in the fight for 2 minutes. After 2 minutes, it was no longer Michael Johnson's fight, and that's because Khabib followed the game plan. We were screaming our heads off because he was doing the total opposite of what we wanted him to do. But once he got into the game plan, where was Michael Johnson? So everybody remembers 2 minutes, but did they forget the other two rounds from 3 minutes where he destroyed him? I mean, he literally destroyed him. I mean, so don't think that Khabib's going to make that mistake again and strike with a striker that's a superior striker than probably. I would say Edson, outside of Conor and Nate Diaz, I think he's probably the next best striker in the lightweight division.
Yeah, he's got a lot of phenomenal striking skills. I'm just wondering, did you ever speak to Khabib about that and find out why he sort of went off game plan for those first couple of minutes? Was it just him sort of testing out his striking? Was it because he hasn't been in there for a while? And how do you sort of make sure that doesn't happen again for this fight and sort of focus on that?
Wow. Can't guarantee he won't do it again. He may want to do it again. It's hard to say, man. It's like, I go, God damn it, why'd you do that? He goes, I don't know, Coach, I wanted to. I said, well, don't do that again. You scared the shit out of us. Go stick to the game plan. He goes, okay, Coach, I stick to the game plan. But, look, fighters are fighters. They're going to go out there. They have one game plan. The game plan goes right out the goddamn door, and then we become nothing but spectators because anything we say, they don't listen to. But, the most important thing is, honestly, is that we get them mentally and physically ready. If they don't follow the game plan, fine. They don't follow the game plan. But as long as they're winning, I don't care. If they're winning, I don't care if they don't follow the game plan. So I'm not concerned on whether he's going to follow the game plan or not. I'm just concerned on whether he's physically fit and mentally ready to go, and he is. So unless something happens between now and then, which I doubt it will, we're ready to go. I mean, he's a better striker. He's better everywhere. He's a better martial artist than I've ever seen him in all the years he's been with me since 2012. He's the best he's ever been right now.
Wow. And we mentioned Tony Ferguson before and how he's a potential next fight for him. But what about Conor McGregor? Because the division at the moment is pretty unclear. Tony Ferguson is recovering from an injury. Is that a fight you guys are potentially looking at if Khabib has a dominant win at UFC 219?
I would say no because, Conor, number one, I don't think Conor will want Khabib, so we're not even focused on that. We're actually, Khabib gets through this fight, I believe our next fight's going to be Tony. I don't believe it's going to be Conor. I mean, hey, if Conor decides that he wants Khabib, fantastic. That's a great fight everybody would want to see. But I think with Conor, they're just, I think that he'd have to see more from Khabib as far as maybe if he fought Tony and gained the interim title and then they fight for the title, which would mean more. So whatever's going to mean the most is what's going to happen. So I'm not really focusing on Conor because I don't think personally Conor is focusing on Khabib right now. And Khabib's not focusing on Conor either because, he's looking at what he's got ahead of him right now, which is Barboza. So in the real world, I say I don't look at it as likely his next fight. But, in reality, right, we've seen things happen that we didn't think were going to happen. So I guess anything's possible.
Yeah, for sure. I know, obviously, not to look past Edson here, but assuming all goes well, you mentioned Tony Ferguson would be more likely. How would you see that fight coming together, seeing as Tony probably has, something different in mind, and that's Conor McGregor? And why do you think that fight would come together?
Well, if that fight does come together, it'll be because Conor vacated the title. That's the only way I see that happening. Otherwise, Tony's going to hang in there for that golden nugget, and I don't blame him. He wants to fight for that big money. But you know what? There also comes a time too with the time of limitation too. You can't hold on forever. You can't hold the division on forever. You're eventually going to have to be put in a situation where if you don't fight Conor, you're going to have to fight somebody. So the only fight that makes sense for Tony, if Conor doesn't fight him, is Khabib. That's it. There's no other fight that makes sense. There's no other fight that people will buy into. And this is about pay-per-view, guys. This is about eyeballs to the screen. And I'm telling you right now that no one's going to watch as much as, Conor and Tony could be the most eyeballs. The second most eyeballs is Tony and Khabib, because they've had 3 times they were supposed to fight. Twice Khabib and 1 time Tony couldn't come to the show. So to me, that's the second most important fight for Tony. But the number one is Conor, because it's obvious, Conor's the biggest star we've ever had in MMA. And anybody I can even see heavyweights wanting to fight Conor because of the pay-per-view dollars, right?
Yeah. Yeah, Stipe versus Conor, I'd buy a ticket to that. Let's move over to a side note, because Luke Rockhold was here in Sydney last week, and he's also training at Combat Club with Henry Hooft. He said that that AKA isn't what it used to be, and mentioned how some of the big names and his regular training partners like Cain Velasquez, Daniel Cormier, and Khabib haven't really been available when he's needed them. Do you feel like there's any truth to that, and has it made a big impact on the gym not having those guys there?
There was a lot of truth to that on his first defense, but not on this one. On this one here, it's I think a lot of circumstances come up, but to me it doesn't matter. I love Luke. I'm with Luke no matter what he does. Whatever Luke wants to do, I'm with him. I've had him for all these years, and I want him. What's comfortable for him is comfortable for me. So I'm in his corner no matter what, So if he wants to be in his corner, I'm there. If he doesn't, it's fine. I'm a big fan of Luke Rockhold. I love the kid. So to me, there's no issues whatsoever. As far as I'm concerned, he's AKA, will always be AKA.
Mm-hmm. Well, what do you think about that matchup and sort of how he stacks up against Robert Whittaker? That's obviously arguably one of the biggest fights of his career, if not the biggest.
I happen to think that's the biggest fight of his career. You can't take what Robert has done to get there. You can't take that lightly. Come on, Derek Brunson, then Jacare, and then Romero, the killer's row, and he did it in fantastic fashion to boot. Man, if you do not look at him as a serious threat and the real, middleweight champ, then you don't know MMA. That guy's the real deal, and he's the real champ. He was the real champ right when he won it. And when he won the interim champ, he was the real champ.
A lot of people are sort of basing their prediction of Luke's performance in the David Branch fight, one where Branch was able to sort of catch Luke with some good shots. Do you feel that was the real Luke Rockhold in there, or was it just kind of a guy coming off a long layoff?
I've never seen Luke get hit like that, that many times. So I think I would just attribute it to, I don't really have an answer for that, I've never seen him get hit like that. Outside what Bisping did, other than that, no one's really ever caught him. So it could be something that Luke did on purpose. He looked like he was in control when he was getting hit. It didn't look like, from my point of view, it didn't look like he was hurt at all. And he just tight clinched them. And, I don't have much thought on that. We never really talked about it per se. It's just, Luke said it wasn't hurting me, so I clinched him, and that's all I can take from that is that Luke was in control. He knew what was happening, and nothing hurt him.
Yeah. Well, the other big thing, obviously, we haven't seen Whittaker tested on the ground too many times, and if it goes there, do you think this is an area where Luke could potentially have, a massive advantage and potentially even finish the fight like he has many times in the past?
Well, with Luke is for me, Luke has the potential to finish the fight anywhere, to stand up the ground. So obviously, Whittaker's best chance with Luke is on the stand up, not the ground for sure. But Luke can finish you anywhere. So I don't look at Luke as, he has an advantage in a lot of areas so much because he knows how to use his range and his height and everything really, really well. Whitaker, on the other hand, is a different type of striker that Luke's never met before. So there's going to be some problems there with the speed and how he mixes everything up really well in his takedown defense. I'm expecting an unbelievably great fight, Yeah, it's a great fight. I don't see it not being a great fight.
Yeah, very excited for that one. And just before we let you go, the other big name that people are looking forward to seeing back again is Cain Velasquez. And last time you spoke, you mentioned he was working on his Airbnb and wasn't training much. Is he back in training these days? Because we saw some photos online, and it looks like he's back in action.
Well, he's been back in action. He's going, not like serious training because, when they're having a child, he's focusing on that. And when I tell people he's a family man, people don't really understand. I mean, he's a family man. And when he's not training, he's with his family. And he chose to be there for his wife when she's going through all this process. And now the baby's been born. He still chooses to be at home until everything's good, So, he'll decide when he wants to fight. He's always been in the game. He's always, I even show clips of me training him here and there, but not on a regular basis, because he'll come in once or twice a week, and then for the most part, he's home with the family.
What? And I guess that's a good thing because a lot of fighters, they're busy fighting and they miss out on a lot of those moments. So it's good that Cain's doing that. What do you think would be a sort of realistic time frame or timeline for Cain's return?
It's up to Cain, but I see him fighting in the first half of the year. I definitely see that happening because I don't see him not getting into full training soon. He wants to fight. He's anxious to fight. So it isn't that he doesn't want to fight. He wants to fight. So it'll happen. It's just, it's going to come down to the UFC and his manager and him, whatever they do. I'm never involved in any of that. So to be honest with you, you guys don't know when he's fighting before I know. So as soon as we hang up, you guys may say, hey, Cain's fighting, in March. And I'm like, huh? Oh, okay. All right. That's the way it is for me all the time. These guys never tell me who or when they're going to fight. I just find out after the fact that the matches are made.
And from your perspective, if Cain was returning, would you like to see him against the winner of Stipe and Francis for the belt? Or given his long layoff, would you rather like to see him have a warm-up fight first?
Well, the thing is, like I said, it's all going to come down to what Cain wants. But if you're asking what I want as a coach, then I would want for him to take the winner of Stipe. Or if he can't have that, I would want him to rematch Fabricio. That's what I as a coach want. But I don't know what Cain wants because he has not. Cain is very quiet, you guys. He doesn't ever say nothing about what he wants. So yeah. I'm not speaking for him. That's just me saying what I would want.
Yeah, absolutely. And whenever you come on, we always just want your opinion, Javier. Last couple of questions, then we're out of your hair. Obviously, the heavyweight title, as you know, is being defended the same night that Daniel Cormier fights Volkan Ozdemir. And some people are fantasizing about the idea that, if DC defends his belt and so does Stipe, maybe DC would move back up to heavyweight and try and win that belt too. I know Cain's sort of there as well in that division, but do you see any possible scenario where that might happen? Because that's a fun theory that's floating around, Javier.
Yeah, that's a fun theory, too, and it could be a realistic theory, and this is how it would work out if it did happen, okay? Cain would talk to DC, or DC would go to Cain and goes, hey, Cain, I want to fight for the title against Stipe. Do you have a problem for me going that one shot? And if Cain says yes, which I'm sure if that's what they agreed on, then yeah, that would happen. That's not far-fetched. It really isn't because that could be something that could happen, but it would be between DC and Cain. They would make that decision jointly together. And DC, with anything DC is, he's a team player. And DC, remember you guys, DC was a great heavyweight. And he dropped to light heavyweight, not because he had to drop, because of respect for Cain. Yeah. That's the only reason why he dropped, because of respect for Cain, not because he couldn't get that title at heavyweight. No, it's his respect for Cain is the only reason why DC dropped. So being that that's the case, you have to understand that anything that happens, it's going to be between those two guys respectfully, because that's the kind of person DC is. And a lot of people do not ever give that man the credit he deserves. No one in my life that I've ever witnessed devotes the time to his team the way he does. Nobody that I've ever met devotes the time to the kids he teaches wrestling to, who's there. Even when he's fighting you guys, he's out there coaching these kids on the weekend and pushing these kids. And he pays for these kids to go when the parents can't afford on these long trips. He pays for these guys to do these things. And I dare you guys to tell me one other superstar that you know of in any sport that has been doing this for consistently like this man has. No one. And no one acknowledges how great of a person he is. And realistically, if it wasn't for the screw-ups with John Jones, everybody would recognize DC as the greatest. You know, if not the greatest, he's definitely known one of the greatest, but it's that asterisk now that we will never know until something has to happen for people to realize how great DC is.
Mm-hmm. Wow, yeah, unbelievable. It's great to see DC giving back so much. And on the John Jones point that you mentioned, is that a fight that you'd like to see DC have over one more time if John does return?
I would love that fight to happen again. Poor John suffered quite a bit, and I'm not mad at him or anything. It is what it is, but I do feel sorry for him, it's like being, his family, can you imagine what they're going through? I mean, it can't be a fun thing, you guys, it is what it is, everybody got gypped, John got gypped, DC got gypped, the fans got gypped, everybody got hurt in this whole fiasco, and I wish it would have never happened. I wish we could have had a fair fight that was deemed fair, and that's it. No asterisk, no nothing. Let's move on forward, but unfortunately that's not what's going to happen here.
Javier, we could chat to you all day. Obviously, we love your honest style, but for now, guys, the big fight is in a couple of weeks. Khabib Nurmagomedov versus Edson Barboza. UFC 219 on December 30th. That is December 31st in Australia because of the time difference at T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas. Don't forget to follow the man on Twitter and Instagram at aka JAV, and of course go to AmericanKickboxingAcademy.com and check out the information there where you can train and have some of the best coaches in the world teaching you all the tricks. So thank you so much again for dropping by the show, Javier. We always appreciate it.
All right, thanks guys. Thanks for having me.
Hey, this is Ariel Helwani, and you're listening to Submission Radio with my two favorite mates, Dennis and Casper.
What's up, fight fans? I'm the fidget spinner, mixed martial arts, Tommy Toehold, and the end of the year card, UFC 219, is finally upon us. It is the last big hurrah for the UFC in 2017, a year that kind of sucked at times, and at other times was pretty fucking awesome. On one hand, Conor didn't fight in the UFC. On the other hand, Conor fought Floyd Mayweather somehow. On one hand, there was a fuck ton of cards that kind of sucked all the balls. On the other hand, we got UFC 217 and UFC 218. Can UFC 219 make the trifecta? I think it can, and here are 5 reasons why. Number 1, this is the first real challenge to Cyborg's throne in some time. With all due respect to everyone who has fought Cyborg in the last decade, and look, Tanya Evinger had about 10 seconds to prep for that fight, Cyborg has basically been playing the featherweight division on very easy mode. She is a destroyer of worlds, and while Holly Holm can definitely have an off night, she's had some pretty on ones, like when she dismantled Ronda Rousey in front of the biggest crowd in, I believe, human history. Cyborg is a force of fucking nature, but the geniuses over there, Jackson Wink, are using all kinds of science and shit to figure out the best way to take her down. It should be a lot of fun, and Holm could add a second name to her legend killer list. The number 2 reason, Khabib Nurmagomedov is making a rare appearance in the octagon. This man fights once every Toy Story sequel. He's like Reptile in the first Mortal Kombat. You know he exists, and you've heard rumors, but you've never actually seen him. Well, barring disaster, which could very easily happen, he'll be taking on Edson Barboza, who is no slouch in the cage and has somehow been ranked number 4 for, I believe, the last decade. But chances are he's going to get suplexed all over the cage. We'll see. Either way, that one is going to be a blast. The 3rd reason, it's not on New Year's Eve. Thank fuck, right? It's on the 30th. Nothing says ringing in the new year like asking everybody at the party to turn on the prelims for you. Saturday has fallen on the 30th, so your 31st is all cleared up for a regrettable evening that will end with you making out with someone you don't even like, and then you're going to feel like shit to start 2018. But not because of UFC 219. That's going to be on Saturday, and that shit's going to be wonderful. The 4th reason UFC 219 is awesome, and you should totally watch it, the Natural Born Killer baller Carlos Condit is fighting on the card? Fuck yes. Look, after his last fight, he was talking retirement. We may not get to see his brand of bloodbath many more times. We need to treasure each of his fights like the rare Pokemon that they are. Not to mention he's fighting Neil Magny, who can put it on somebody. And that fight opens the main card. What a wonderful, wonderful way to start your card. It's going to be a great Saturday. All the mistakes of your New Year's Eve party are still ahead of you, and it's just going to be the best. And the last reason you should watch UFC 219 is because Dan Hooker is fighting on the card. Now, there's nothing inherently spectacular about that. Dan's a great fighter, and he's working his way up the ranks. But with the last name of Hooker, the tweets during his fights are always just top-notch. Seriously, if you don't follow MMA Twitter during a Dan Hooker fight, you're not experiencing a Dan Hooker fight properly. It is truly something to behold. The collective MMA community is a goofy fucking group of people. So those were 5 reasons why you're probably gonna have a blast watching UFC 219, fight fans. I'm Tommy Toehold. Thanks for having me on, guys. Back to you.
Hey, this is Tony Okagui Ferguson, and you guys listen to Submission Radio. Keep tuning in, guys.
All right, guys. Our next guest is a man of many hats. He is, of course, a multiple-time UFC title challenger, the first man to compete in 4 separate UFC weight classes, the host of UFC Tonight on Fox, a UFC commentator, co-host of the Anik and Florian podcast, a third degree BJJ black belt, not to mention a phenomenal analyst and even an ambassador for the BJJ promotion, Kasai. He is kind enough to take some time out of his extremely busy schedule, the one and only Kenny Florian. Kenny, welcome to the program. How are you today, man?
Absolutely, man. Thanks for having me. I'm doing well.
Well, Kenny, last time we spoke to you, we were a few days away from opening your new gym, Marikai. You got to give us the lowdown. How was the big opening? How's the gym going so far?
It's going great, man. Thanks for asking. Everyone says Marikai. It's Meraki technically, but I forgive you. That's fine. Everyone says the same thing. It's Meraki, and I love it, man. It's been awesome. Me and my business partner Jason Hunt. We've been working really hard to get it up and ready. We have an awesome student base already of around 100 students in just like 3 months' time. So we've been really blessed, man, that the response has been awesome from the community, and it's been fun. We just started doing kids classes last month, and that's really starting to grow. And it's a reminder of how powerful the martial arts really is. I knew that before, but again, just seeing it and seeing all the hard work that Jason and I have been putting into it, and seeing the students improve it's awesome, man. It's such a rewarding experience.
I'm wondering, Kenny, is this sort of the kind of gym that you would expect potentially, MMA fighters or BJJ competitors would go to, say, prepare, like do a training camp and do those kinds of preparations? Or is the focus here more sort of on the community and sort of training, I guess the general public?
We definitely want to have Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu competitors. That would be an awesome goal to have high-level competitors, and obviously being a new gym, we're kind of starting from scratch. We do have some black belts and brown belts that joined our gym, but more than anything, I think we kind of want to focus on the jiu-jitsu side of things. If there's a mixed martial arts fighter that wants to join and improve his jiu-jitsu or her jiu-jitsu, they're always more than welcome to join and do that. It wouldn't be a focus, and it hasn't been a focus of Jason and mine to do the fighting aspect of it. It's, we do that. I have a gym in Boston, Florian Martial Arts Center, and we do have that focus over there. But for this gym, we kind of, I wanted to myself, particularly, really wanted to kind of stray away from that a little bit, and kind of create an environment where just the regular Joe can come in and learn Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and also kind of develop Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioners and competitors from scratch. So I'm not saying we won't do that in the future, but as of right now, there's no plans of that.
All right, well, we want to get your thoughts on some of the big things happening in the world of MMA, and one of which, of course, is RDA's big win over the weekend over Robbie Lawler. We've got to get your thoughts. What did you think of RDA's win, and also the success that he's had at 170 compared to other fighters who have moved up in weight? Is it his style, his overall skill set, or is it necessarily strength that he's been able to add, or was it the cut to 155 was truly a detriment? What do you think is the real key here?
I was really blown away by RDA's performance. Robbie Lawler has been fighting at such a high level for so long. There was a period where there was a little bit of a down streak. Maybe he wasn't improving as much as he wanted to, like when he was over in Strikeforce or Elite XC. But, since then, since coming over to the UFC, the level that he's maintained has been just mind-blowing. Now, I thought Robbie was going to win that fight. He was the larger man. I thought he proved that he can go 5 hard rounds in the UFC. And I thought RDA was going to be undersized. Now, RDA was the man who was able to pressure Robbie Lawler. A lot of that was because of the knee injury to Robbie Lawler. And apparently there was either a scramble or whatever that Robbie hurt his knee on. He also, I guess he had an injured rib or whatever. But these are the things, these are the risks you take as a fighter. These are the things that happen in a fight. So because of that, you have to give credit to Rafael dos Anjos for going out there and employing a brilliant game plan. When you have 2 fighters that are very aggressive, who have a lot of weapons, Tyron Woodley and I, we kept discussing it. The person who was going to move forward was going to win that fight, and that person was clearly Rafael dos Anjos. Whatever happened to his leg, whether it was Rafael dos Anjos who caused that leg injury from kicking it, or whether it was a scramble, whatever it was, Robbie Lawler was basically, his feet were planted in the mat, and his only choice really was to try to stand and try to catch Dos Anjos coming in. And Dos Anjos is just too slick of a fighter and too smart of a fighter to fall for that. And when you're forcing a knockout like that, and when you're looking for one big shot, it generally doesn't come to fruition at the elite level. And Dos Anjos was able to isolate that, take full advantage, and beat up that lead leg of Robbie Lawler, and beat up the body and get to the clinch position. He was hitting takedowns against Lawler. And it was a dominant performance from Dos Anjos. And I think it was not only his skill set, getting better, but as you mentioned, it was the weight cut. I think that weight cut down to 155 pounds was just brutal. Dos Anjos, I've heard he walked around at around 200 pounds in the offseason, which is just insane to get down to 55. So him cutting down to 55 time and time again really was just draining him of all of his energy. And, as a guy who cut weight from like 186 pounds down to 145 pounds, I know what that's like. It's brutal. Yeah. You cannot fight the same, no matter what kind of skills you have. If you're a Ferrari with no gas, you don't go anywhere. It's pretty simple. And Dos Anjos, I think, now has the energy and the strength to perform at a higher level. And sometimes being the bigger fighter isn't the answer. We've seen guys like Frankie Edgar, who is undersized for the division at 155 pounds, have the belt at 155 and show that he had a lot of success in that division despite being undersized. Frankie Edgar could probably even fight at 135 if he really wanted to cut the weight. But, I think that, I think people are realizing that, you don't have to be the biggest guy in the world. You can use other assets like speed and skill to be very effective at the weight class, and Dos Anjos is proof of that.
And I remember you in an interview saying how, the cut down to 145 was one of the hardest things that you've ever had to do, and you managed to do that twice. I think it kind of shows when you look at a guy like RDA, sort of, where the sport is today, and I guess in terms of weight cutting, there's still a lot of things to do, but it has improved a lot, and I guess the mindset's different. But with RDA, obviously, like you mentioned, undefeated at 170, just beat the number 3 guy in Legend in Lawler. What do you think is next? Do you think he should fight Tyron next for the belt, or do you think maybe he should potentially fight someone like Colby Covington in a title eliminator while Tyron gets his surgery?
I guess it depends on what the layoff time is for Tyron Woodley. I wouldn't. I mean, listen. I think Dos Anjos deserves it. I think Dos Anjos deserves that next title shot. I really do. Maybe Colby can get a shot against someone like a Wonder Boy who already has lost twice to Tyron Woodley. He's in a difficult position. So in some ways, Wonder Boy kind of has to beat, a few more guys before he gets a third shot against Woodley if Woodley still has the belt. So, I think Dos Anjos really did enough to deserve that title shot.
And I think if that is the fight that comes together, that's a really exciting fight. Obviously, Woodley and RDA, seeing how they would collide. But, while on the topic of Covington, you guys had a bit of a Twitter back and forth after he retweeted a video of you where you presented his theoretical road to a UFC title shot. I'm just curious, what made you respond to him in the first place after he tweeted at you?
I think that I think in some ways and sometimes, people kind of need to look at themselves a little bit. And if I had the opportunity to be a mirror to Colby Covington, then I'm going to do my best to do that. And listen, everyone has a different approach, and everyone will live their life in whatever way they choose, and that's fine. But I think that, when you talk about bully-type mentalities and disrespect, I just don't like that. I don't like it. It's something that I think is kind of poisoning the sport a little bit. And Colby is kind of one of those guys who hasn't shown the most respect to people. And at the end of the day, I think we are martial artists, and it's people already have a certain perception of cage fighters. And I think that he's not helping that perception. Let's put it that way.
It's interesting because it seems like a lot of fighters are sort of taking Covington's road to trash talk. And for a lot of them, it's not as successful as it has been for Covington. But I think a lot of fighters see that if you're winning, trash talk is the key to getting the big money fights. Do you think it's almost something that the UFC needs to try and enforce as to, maybe rewarding fighters that don't talk trash as much? Because in the recent times, I mean, with the likes of Conor McGregor, a lot of these other guys, it does seem like trash talk is the main way you can get the big money fights without having to fight that often.
I definitely respect the marketing aspect of it, right? I think you can be confident and you can call out guys and you could say certain things. I think there's just a certain level of respect. I think that when you start getting into like the bully type mentality and you start really insulting, when you're using things like gay slurs, when you're using racist remarks, when you're insulting countries and groups of people, that's too much. We have enough of that going on in the world. And I think like we should kind of show a much more respectful side. That's myself. That's what I think. But, as far as marketing yourself, I get that. But if there is a line, imagine if we picked our Olympic teams based on how good our trash talk was. Like, that guy's the number one guy, but he's quiet. So we're going to give it to the number 3 guy because he has more Twitter followers, or this guy talks more trash. He's really selling the fact that he's going to win this 100-meter race. So we're going to put him in there. Sorry, I know you got first place and you're the fastest man in the world, but this guy really talks a good game. So we're going to just jump the line. Okay, is that cool with you? It doesn't make it a sport anymore, does it? And that's kind of what bothers me. And not just me. I think it bothers a lot of the professional fighters. So the game has definitely changed than when I was fighting. Now I sound like an old guy, which I am. But I think that a balance needs to be found.
Imagine that. I wonder which Olympic team and which country would have the best trash talking. It's the funny thing is, and I'm not the first guy to make this comparison, but it's very reminiscent of obviously Chael Sonnen's antics in the past. And Chael's a guy you've obviously shared the Fox desk with, and he ended up actually becoming a really beloved figure by the fans and sort of endeared himself. And even though he was the original bad guy that insulted Brazil and medium rare steak and all that stuff, what do you think about those comparisons? And do you think Colby can sort of turn the corner and eventually become that beloved figure, much like Chael did?
It's possible. I mean, I don't know.
Maybe not likely, though.
Probably not likely. But I think Chael had a certain charisma about him, and I think he had a certain wittiness about him, whereas Colby's just there's not a whole lot of I don't know if there's a whole lot of slickness to what he's saying. It's kind of just sounds like an angry 15-year-old. You know what I mean? It's not. Chael at least had knowledge of how to play the heel in a relatively intelligent way.
Well, on the flip side, looking at one of the most beloved fighters of all time, George St. Pierre, his coach Faraz Zahabi recently said the GSP would heal up and come back for a mega fight. He threw out names such as McGregor and Mayweather. What do you think should be next for GSP, and who would you like to see him face?
I think this is a guy who has done it all in the sport. And I think if there's one guy who deserves a super fight or a mega fight, it's GSP. And talk about a guy who was old school, who did it the old-fashioned way of just clearly beating anyone and everyone. He wasn't a guy who was going, oh, well, this guy, he doesn't promote himself enough, so I'm not going to fight John Fitch, or I'm not going to fight Josh Koscheck, or I'm not going to fight this. He would just fight whoever the hell it was. Whoever the UFC had for him is who he would face. So I think that he does deserve a mega fight. I know that in talking with George, he doesn't really like the idea of calling out a fighter who weighs less than him. And he never really has been the guy who's called out people. But as far as asking or demanding a fight with Conor McGregor, I don't think you'll ever hear it from GSP, because being a guy who was bullied when he was a kid, he feels like that's kind of a bully mentality. You don't try to pick a fight with someone smaller than you. That's kind of what has been GSP's mentality. If it's a fight that is offered to him and the fans want it enough, I think he would do it. And I think it would be the largest UFC fight in history. So I think it would be interesting for that fight to happen. And of course we would hear all the complaints. Why isn't Conor McGregor defending his belt? Blah blah blah. I think Conor McGregor, for better or worse, he also obviously deserves a big fight as well. He's the biggest name in the sport. He has changed the game for a lot of people as far as showing the potential of what a mixed martial arts fighter can make in this game. So he has gained a lot of leverage business-wise, and what he can demand as a fighter. So that'd be an interesting fight. And maybe a Tyron Woodley GSP fight would be amazing as well. So I'm really curious to see what GSP does next. I know that him going to 185 really was painful for him. Getting ulcer colitis is extremely painful. He was eating way more than he should have. And kind of did himself some harm in that process. So he wants to fight closer to his weight now of 170 pounds, if he does it again. So we'll see.
Yeah, for sure. And I would love to see Woodley versus GSP at some point. I feel like, I don't know, for me, I think that's a more fun than sort of the McGregor one, even though obviously the build-up there will be huge. Just quickly, Kenny, before we talk about Kasai, while we've got you, and this is obviously our last show before UFC 219, want to quickly get a couple of quick predictions and pick your brain. Obviously, the first one being Cris Cyborg's fight against Holly Holm. Bit of a tough one to predict. How do you see this one playing out if you sort of had to predict it?
This is a fascinating fight for me because Cyborg is just like a Tasmanian devil in the way that she fights. Just all aggression, all offense, coming forward. And then you have Holly Holm, which is really a very interesting opposite to her, a counter fighter, someone who really values the idea of footwork and defense and counter shots and counter punching. And if there's one woman in the world who can maybe counterpunch with Cyborg, it's Holly Holm, right? I mean, she's a multiple-time boxing world champion, kickboxing world champion, has upset people in the past, obviously, with her most famous fight, most famous win being over Ronda Rousey. So I think it's an interesting fight. I think the longer the fight goes, the more it favors Holly Holm. I just don't know if she can do it consistently against someone like Cyborg. And on top of that, it's not like Cyborg is just a striker, right? I mean, she has good takedowns. She's very strong. She's big for the division. I think Holm is one of the few women who can contend with the power of Cyborg. I think she's very strong and built as well. She's a tremendous athlete. I just don't know if she's fast enough, and I don't know if she's able to thwart those takedown attempts from Cyborg. Cyborg, she's a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. She's going to have brutal ground and pound. She has decent submissions on the ground. I think she has the advantage on the ground, certainly against Holly Holm. So it's going to be a very interesting fight. But as of right now, I mean, I got to favor Cyborg. I just don't know, if Holly Holm is going to be able to counter-strike consistently against someone like Cyborg. But it's possible. If there's one woman who can do it, I think it's Holly Holm.
It's the big question going into UFC 219. The other big question is Khabib Nurmagomedov and him fighting Edson Barboza in the co-main event. What kind of Khabib we'll see and where he's at, obviously with his health and his skill set. I mean, Barboza's leg kicks are very, very dangerous, but, we all know Khabib is just an amazing wrestler. How do you see this fight playing out? What's your prediction here? Because this could be a very difficult fight for Khabib if things don't play out the way that he wants it to.
Well, there's no doubt about it. Khabib also kind of has a tendency of once he gets into a rhythm, he then is just going to be all over you. So it's him getting into that rhythm that can be the problem at times. We saw him get rocked against Michael Johnson, who is also a very fast and pretty technical striker. But certainly doesn't have the speed of probably even Edson Barboza, and doesn't have the arsenal of someone like Edson Barboza. For me, for my money, if there's one guy I had to pick to show how to throw a jab, a cross, an uppercut, a kick, all those things, it would be Edson Barboza. Everything he does is fundamentally perfect. When you add in his speed, when you add in his power, this is one of the most explosive strikers and the most technical strikers I've ever seen in the UFC, period. Does he have his weaknesses? Yes. He's a guy that can be rocked on the feet as well. You know, some people criticize his chin. We saw him get rocked and taken out by Donald Cerrone. He also can be taken down. We've seen it early on in his career where maybe he was a little bit gun-shy in throwing strikes and getting taken down. Jamie Varner was able to get a big upset win over him back in the day. He certainly made big strides since the Jamie Varner fight, of course. So it's the first 3 minutes where Khabib Nurmagomedov has to be very, very careful against Edson Barboza. If Edson Barboza can really control the distance and land shots from the outside and counter those level changes with something like a knee or an uppercut, it could be a short night for Khabib Nurmagomedov. And you got to think, all the pressure's on Khabib right now. He's a guy who's undefeated. He's a guy who, was supposed to get a title shot way back when. Had those fights that have been canceled repeatedly against Tony Ferguson. Everyone's been kind of criticizing for not making the weight. And, I think the pressure's on Khabib right now. So this is a very dangerous fight. We saw, that kind of take place with Ricardo Lamas taking on someone like Josh Emmett. Now, Josh Emmett was unranked, and Edson Barboza is ranked in the top 10, of course. So a little bit different there, but still a lot of pressure on Khabib to get it done.
And before we get, by the way, phenomenal analysis, Kenny. You've clearly done your homework already. Before we get out of your hair, obviously we're going to talk about the other big thing in your life, and that's Kasai, the New York-based premier grappling promotion for which you are obviously an ambassador for. Now, Kasai Pro took place on December 9th. It was a great event. Tell us a bit about the event and some of the highlights for you personally.
Yeah, absolutely. Kasai really just brought it for their first professional event. It was really exciting just because just the competition that they had alone with the tournament and the people that they brought in for the super fights, I just really, it couldn't have gone any better in my opinion. So, I was also just very surprised with some of the results. And that's always exciting. Anytime you see, a guy who was, pretty much an underdog there in Renato Canuto getting it done and going all the way to the final and beating guys like Gary Tonin and Munchie Kira. I was just blown away by his performance. And then he kind of followed it up this past weekend by winning the World Championships in the no-gi. So it's always exciting when you see a star emerge. And Kasai was able to bring that with Renato Canuto. So I thought the tournament was just phenomenal. It was exciting. I think maybe some of the matches we need to be a little bit maybe some changes will be made as far as the rules, but either way I thought it was very, very successful. And then you have matches like Craig Jones and Murilo Santana and Gordon Ryan and Yuri Simoes, which was phenomenal, that ended in submission. Gordon Ryan essentially establishing himself as probably the best no-gi grappler in the world today. I thought was just awesome. So really exciting stuff, and you guys probably are real happy about what Craig Jones is doing on the grappling scene right now, putting you guys on the map, just taking ankles left and right, man.
Yeah, that's right. Him and Cadell have a very funny and amazing relationship as well. So Australia is definitely represented right now, and we're pretty excited as well because Kasai's looking really good for 2018, and we know you guys are going to continue holding the model of giving one amateur athlete the chance of a lifetime to compete for a professional title if they win the qualifying tournament at the Kasai Elite Grappling Championships amateur tournament. So talk to me a little bit about what can fans expect from the next show, and also how has, I suppose, giving an amateur an opportunity kind of excited things a little bit for all the fans as well?
Well, it's always cool because, everyone always dreams of kind of competing against these big names, right? And I think it also allows people to really get that shot, to get that chance as an amateur and test themselves against the best in the world. And I think Kasai is looking the best thing about Kasai is they're reaching out to the people. They're reaching out on social media. They want to know what the fans want next. What weight class do they want to see next? And based on that, we'll have our amateur events and get as many people as we can, and then maybe find maybe another breakout star, whether it's an established pro who's competing, who hasn't broke through the scene yet, or get it in the form of an amateur, that is going to show promise and maybe get some upset wins in the pro division. So I'm really excited to see how that develops and how the tournament evolves over time. And Holis Gracie has just done an amazing job. The whole team has done phenomenal. Rich Byrne, who is just one of the most passionate guys you'll ever meet when it comes to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He's the guy really behind it, who's been supporting it financially and has been wanting to see this come to fruition for a very long time. And I'm just really excited to be a part of it and really excited to see what we bring in the coming months.
Well, there you go, guys. Obviously, look out for Kasai. In early 2018, they're going to put on another fantastic show, and just a really great addition to obviously the other grappling promotions, and this one being a really good representation on the East Coast. And of course, follow Kenny Florian on Twitter at Kenny Florian. Make sure to listen to the Anik and Florian podcast at Anik Florian Pod. I'm sure you guys will be doing a lot more predictions for UFC 219. Check out Kenny's new BJJ. It's called Meraki BJJ. That's on Twitter. And of course, follow at Kasai Grappling and check them out on flowgrappling.com. Kenny, we could pick your brain for the entire day, but I feel like we've been greedy with your time. So thank you so much for jumping on and chatting with us. Really appreciate it.
Always a pleasure, fellas. I'm sure we'll be doing it again soon.
Hey guys, this is Brian Stan. You're listening to Submission Radio.
Alright guys, our next guest is one of the most respected analysts in MMA. You all know his work on MMA Fighting and SiriusXM, where he hosts the Luke Thomas Show Monday through to Fridays, as well as his podcast, Monday Morning Analyst, and the Promotional Malpractice live chat. He's also a regular on the MMA Beat, and he returns back to Submission Radio today to help us preview UFC 219. He is Luke Thomas. Luke, welcome back to the program, man. How are you?
I'm good, fellas. Thank you for having me. Happy to be back.
Well, we're happy to have you. It's the last episode of Submission Radio for the year, so what would a special episode be without Luke Thomas? It couldn't happen.
Yeah, exactly. You couldn't even do it without me.
We couldn't do it without you. We'd have to keep the episode going for another week and miss Christmas, and our families would hate us. So thanks for joining us this week. Let's talk about UFC 219 because we know you're a busy man and don't have much time. We want to kick things off by talking about the co-main event between Khabib Nurmagomedov and Edson Barboza. It's an insanely intriguing fight where both men have the ability to create huge problems for each other. On one hand, Khabib has his excellent grappling, but then Barboza has excellent takedown defense, not to mention the kind of dangerous striking or leg kicks that could make Khabib pay dearly. So, who do you think this matchup favors more?
Oh, probably. That's an interesting question. Like, who does it match up? Is not the same question as who might win in terms of who has the benefit of this. Here's what I mean. Like, Nurmagomedov should be able to win this. He should be able to win this. But the reality is, if you're asking me who it favors, it might favor, in a sense, Barboza, merely because they start on the feet and his takedown defense is excellent and his cardio is excellent as well. And it's a 3-round contest, so he has a little bit more to give at every interval. So in that way, Nurmagomedov is always starting from a deficit. If they started on the ground in some kind of neutral position or whatever, if they were somehow forced to compete on the ground, that would be obviously a tremendous advantage the other way, even if you thought somehow Barboza could get back to his feet. So in that respect, I'm going to lean towards Barboza. I mean, really, it's a bad matchup for either guy, right? Maybe cardio won't be the most significant factor, but Nurmagomedov, I think that there is something overstated about his striking liability, but clearly it's not his best asset. It's the exact opposite way for Edson Barboza, and Edson Barboza is fast and precise, and frankly looking really good. That win over Dariush was absolutely tremendous, and that was another guy who, I'm not saying is Nurmagomedov level takedowns, but is certainly no slouch in that respect. So both guys have their work cut out from here.
And I'm not saying that Barboza is impervious to finding his back against the cage, but he is pretty good, and a lot of his game sort of focuses around circling out and finding the center of the octagon again. And if he does have early success with sort of damaging leg kicks and makes it hard, if not impossible, for Khabib to close distance or shoot, how much of Khabib's arsenal do you think at that point goes out the window? And does he have any backup strategies to win if he's sort of, limping there and Barboza's able to sort of pick him apart?
Yeah, I don't know what he would do. I really don't. I don't know Because remember, relative to the previous question, it's not merely getting him down, but getting him down and holding him down. Nurmagomedov has developed a style where if you can do that kind of thing, it's just so absolutely all-encompassing. But if you can find somebody who is good at negating that, it's not one but two things you have to be able to do consistently, to take down and press down. And that's just so utterly taxing and so very difficult against a guy like Barboza. So if Nurmagomedov fails to do that, maybe he's got tricks up his sleeve that he hasn't shown because he hasn't been forced to show them. But I honestly don't know. I mean, for him, it's ground game or bust, right? Unless he's facing somebody who's significantly less of a striker than he is. And again, I don't want to say he's just some walking nightmare where he's going to get lit up and he can't do anything on the feet. But I don't know that you can beat Barboza if you have to stand on the feet, right?
How do you see Khabib going about closing the distance and sort of, a lot of his great takedowns do come from the clinch against the cage. How do you see him closing that distance successfully? Because one of the things you notice against, say, guys like Michael Johnson, guys that Barboza faced, Michael Johnson, Dariush, Tony Ferguson, they all had pretty good striking. And then when they backed him up and used that forward pressure, there was always that threat of, they may land something big. Whereas with Khabib, he hasn't really had that, devastating striking. And he's a little bit more one-dimensional his approach. How do you think he's going to go about closing that distance and sort of getting the fight where he wants it?
Boy, I wish I really knew. I think the one thing working in his favor is that the kicking of Barboza might be somewhat diminished. It is foolish to think that Barboza won't kick for two reasons. One, it is just so central to his offense. He has actually shown liability with his boxing. When he has to strictly rely on that. He's better when he's mixing up the two, and frankly, I think he's a little bit more comfortable at kickboxing range, and he likes to be on his feet and be fleet of foot with that, which aids boxing more, but he finds a way to combine the two. So, one, it's just central to his offense, and two, because it's central to his offense, he's not going to completely abandon it. If you've noticed in other contests, he is pretty good because he's so explosive and so quick of landing some kind of leg attack, whether it's a body kick or to the inside leg or whatever, and then retracting it without too much trouble. If he can do that more and more, where he can crack Nurmagomedov without any response or crack it and be able to not get caught up where he's now having to limp leg out of it or Nurmagomedov uses it to attach and then drive him to the fence, then that would be a really bad sign. So if you're seeing him land leg kicks or body kicks, and Nurmagomedov is just kind of absorbing it rather than trying to launch offense from it, that would be really, really bad. On the other hand, I do think it will be diminished somewhat. And because it will be diminished somewhat, and that Nurmagomedov is going to want to close distance and push you against the fence, to me that means you're going to see Barboza heavy footwork, constantly bouncing, constantly moving, light on his feet. So because of that, if I'm Nurmagomedov, I don't know, man. You don't want to rush into it, but you don't want to waste a lot of time either. You got to really get up in his face. You got to make him move backwards. You got to make him make choices about laterally which direction he wants to go. And to be honest, I think this might be the worst matchup for Nurmagomedov in the UFC, even more so than Tony Ferguson, only because Ferguson will almost oblige you if you want to go to the ground, whereas Edson treats it like lava.
Well, considering his marketability and also his past feud with Conor McGregor and the overall past dominance, not to mention the UFC's lack of stars, how devastating do you think it would be for the UFC if Khabib was to lose to Barboza?
Not great, but not the end of the world. Certainly they want to grow their presence in Russia. That would be, devastating for them potentially, or bad anyway in the short run. Obviously, they would want to establish more contenders if Conor McGregor were to come back, as you noted. So in that sense, it would be devastating. But, lightweight, while a very tough division, one loss is hardly defining. I mean, Eddie Alvarez lost to Conor, and it's not crazy to consider that in 2018 he might get a title shot at some point. I mean, no one's really talking about it now, but if you're just looking down the line, is he really that far away? Not really. No, he's not. So I would say, look, it would be in the short run obviously bad. But if someone would say to me that it would be cataclysmically bad, I would say that would be an exaggeration.
And just to sort of look at the stakes, what do you think these guys are fighting for? I mean, the top of the division is murky to say the best. We don't know where Tony Ferguson stands. Seems like he's going to be angling for this Conor McGregor fight. Do you think Khabib ends up, or whoever wins, Edson or Khabib, do you think they fight Tony Ferguson? Do you think there's any way that they slot in against Conor McGregor while Ferguson's recovering?
If Edson Barboza has an incredible performance and somehow can find a way to sell himself, which he's not been quite good at on the second level, obviously been very good at on the first, then sure. If Nurmagomedov can get the job, I mean, if Nurmagomedov goes in there, let's say subs him out in a round, you know he's going to sell himself on the microphone, so that would be the case. But I have a hunch that even if Nurmagomedov wins, it's going to be Edson Barboza is going to get his pound of flesh one way or the other. Question is how bad. So in that sense, sure. But I mean, if I'm them, I'm really saying to myself, God only knows what Conor McGregor is going to do. Just give me a title fight. Leave it open. Say that you just deserve to fight for a title, whether that's Tony Ferguson imminently, whether that is Conor McGregor down the road, or whoever that might end up being. I just think you say, at this point, my next fight in this octagon should not be for anything other than UFC gold around my waist, or the opportunity to put UFC gold around my waist, and not really worry about who it ultimately is.
Well, even though we're a couple of weeks out, we like to squeeze as much juice out of you as we can, Luke. So what's the official prediction? If you had to give us a quick one right now, how do you think Khabib wins this one?
I think he finds a way to eventually get it done. It just seems to me that he's a little tougher than people realize. I do think he's good about his entries into takedowns are quick. Now, he can get kneed, and I think he's going to take some abuse in this one. I just don't see how he gets loose with that abuse. But I think ultimately what he's probably going to do is, I'll say he'll win 2 of 3 rounds. That's it. But honestly, if he goes in there and just gets walloped in a round, who could possibly be surprised by that? The firepower is tremendous. The takedown defense is tremendous. The speed is tremendous. And if Nurmagomedov, I don't know, he's a bit all of the eggs in one basket kind of guy, and that basket's got some holes when with Edson Barboza in it. So I'll say he can do enough to win 2 rounds, but probably not much more.
Yeah, I think that's a good prediction. We don't have too much more time with you, Luke, so we'll skip over to the main event. Obviously, Cris Cyborg versus Holly Holm. Now, I think it's a very fascinating fight, and obviously in the past there's been some very highly decorated, even former Olympian female fighters facing off. You think of Rousey versus McMahon. But considering not only their credentials, but also competitive histories and past accolades, do you think it's fair to say that, Cris Cyborg versus Holly Holm is the highest level fight between 2 women in MMA history, Luke?
That's an interesting question. I hadn't thought about that. That's a very good one. Wow. Certainly for a UFC belt, you can say that. Yeah, probably. You're right. The Sarah McMahon one is interesting, but she was still very developmental at the time.
Yeah. And then we saw what happened with Rousey afterwards, obviously.
Right. So there was a bit she had a lopsided game as well, and then completely collapsed thereafter. I'm hesitant to say it is the number 1, but it's probably on anybody's short list. How about that? I mean, we have to sort of examine what that might mean if there's anybody else, and there might be some kind of esoteric different fight that I don't know about that happened in Japan. People forget that the Japanese female scene used to be significantly more robust than it is now, or even in some ways even than America is now. But it's certainly on anyone's short list. And to your point, what I really like about this is the extensive non-MMA combat experience that both ladies have. The kickboxing experience of Holly Holm, the boxing experience. And folks forget about this. You go back and you look at Cyborg. She has competed in IBJJF tournaments in the gi and won some decent ones like that. And of course, she got smoked by Urena Bars, but man, to go in there and survive like she did and to show that kind of grit and determination, man, that is not easy. And so to me, this is not really interesting because of the skills they bring to the octagon, but the kind of skills they've shown outside of it as well. I realize the two are related, but I just mean that is a fairly unusual pairing.
And just sort of looking at the matchup, obviously there's a lot of ways to look at it, but just sort of from I guess there's this notion floating around that I see from a lot of fans, and that's obviously that because Holly wasn't able to beat or have huge success against the smaller Jermaine Durandamy, she won't be able to do much against Cyborg, even though Jermaine herself is pretty tall and long. What do you think about that notion?
I don't think she can realistically hurt Cyborg. I mean, it sounds strange given what she did to Bethe Correia and Ronda Rousey, but the thing about Cyborg is she has this reputation as this sort of fearsome attacker, which we know she can be. There's plenty of evidence to suggest that. But if you go back and look at the Tanya Evinger fight, what really stood out to me about that was the patience. Like, if you had told Cyborg, you got to finish her in 1 round, she probably could have. she probably could have done it with a relative ease, but she would have looked unpolished and feral. And I think that's a gear she can still get into, but you can tell she's trying to style herself into something of an all-around technician, not merely a person who is just so physically overwhelming that there's nothing you can do, something like a raw Ngannou for women or something, right?
Yeah.
That's really not what she is. She shows head movement, and she goes to the body before she goes to the head, and she doesn't rush into attack. She doesn't just press someone against the fence and just brawl. And so to me, it's like, you know, is Holly Holm a good striker? Yeah, of course. Is she probably going to land a little bit here and there? No doubt about it. But for me, I think that skill for skill, Cyborg is probably right up there with her, or at least, you know, very, very competitive. And if she can take it to the ground, obviously, you know, it's lights out at that point. But I just feel like it'd be very foolish to think about this as, you know, the Strike Force Cyborg. She's a completely different fighter, and that opens up the various possibilities of what might happen, including going very, very late into the fight all the way through a fifth round.
I was going to ask you about that, Luke, because, you know, a lot of people, when they give their prediction, they look at Holly Holm and they believe that if the fight goes long, that is the part of the fight that will really benefit Holly, where she can start sort of picking Cyborg apart and stay out in the distance and pick her shots, and that Cyborg may be tiring out. But from this Cyborg that we've seen, that we saw with the UFC 214, do you believe there's a good chance that she may even do better than Holly Holm when it comes to the later rounds? A lot better than people think she would, at least.
Yeah, I see it exactly that way. I see Holly as obviously very, very skilled and and Holly is good at not taking a ton of abuse, you know, which is going to come in handy against someone like Cyborg, particularly this newer Cyborg who's also more patient. So I would fundamentally expect this to go late unless some kind of crazy shot lands from either lady. But yeah, I actually see it the way that you're talking about. I actually feel like Holly's offense over time, like she comes in with a game plan. And you should stick to that game plan. You saw that game plan that Floyd Mayweather had. It wasn't do the same thing every round, but it was, here's what we're going to do in these rounds, here's what we're going to do in these rounds, and then the following rounds. And those may be different things, but you know that's the pattern you're going to take out. Holly gets a little bit one note with it, where at times she'll have these varieties of attacks, and she'll only make minor adjustments from them. Now, you saw that against Shevchenko. She didn't really change over time. The attack she was launching in the first and the way she was getting countered in the first only got worse by the fifth round. I don't see why Cyborg can't do that. I'm not saying Cyborg's as decorated a striker as Shevchenko, but she's good enough, and you've seen her get better as time goes on, where she begins to she has so many offensive opportunities and so many weapons, she really begins to dial up the offense. I kind of feel like, in MMA anyway, Holly stays a little bit the same. So I would say by the later rounds, I'm expecting Cyborg to look better than she does in the first.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that makes it really fascinating. And, you know, if Holly is able to pull off the upset and dethrone Cyborg, what do you think it would rank among, you know, some of the all-time biggest upsets in MMA? Ones like, you know, Fedor Verdum, GSP Sarah, Dillashaw Barao, you know, even Ronda Holly. And I know the betting odds may not reflect, you know, these, but just in the sense that obviously Cyborg here is getting a massive push, and this whole division, in a sense, has been, you know, it's the Cyborg division. It's there to showcase her. And if Holly was to throw a wrench in there, I think it'd be a pretty big wrench.
Yeah, I think that the way you framed it was correct. In terms of the betting odds, no, would not necessarily reflect that this was some sort of massive upset, which is a credit to Holly, actually, that it's that close, or at least the odds makers might be confused. I guess we'll have to see what the result is. But I would say that if you are on the end of scoring, frankly, if you're a female fighter, what are the two biggest scalps you could possibly collect? It used to be Gina Carano, which Cyborg got. And then in the last 5 years, you could say you want a Jacek, but that's not as big as Cyborg. It's just not reputationally for what that would mean. And it's not nearly as big, obviously, as Ronda Rousey. Holm already has the Rousey one. If she got the Cyborg one, you couldn't call her the best female fighter of all time because she had that 3-fight losing streak. She got finished. She lost her title. That would be, you know, there's just not enough evidence to suggest that. But it would put her in something of a Verdum pre-Stipe Miocic territory, where there's this debate about, like, who is the best heavyweight of all time. And the real answer is no one really knows. Yeah. Obviously, if you wanted to pick Fedor, you could. If you wanted to pick Cain, you could. Now, Stipe, of course, we'll see what he does with Ngannou, but I'm talking about prior to that. But Verdum was in this space where no one expected him to beat Fedor, and he did. And no one expected him to beat Cain, and he did. This would be even bigger than that, given I'm not saying that women's featherweight is a bigger division than men's heavyweight, but I'm just saying in terms of the biggest names you could possibly beat, she would have both on her record. And I don't know what the odds, if you would lay out the odds saying Holly Holm, what are the odds for Holly Holm to beat Ronda Rousey and then beat Cyborg? It would be some astronomical number. In that sense, the betting odds would be very much in her favor.
Well, with all that said, and as we wrap up, what is your official prediction for this fight?
I just don't see how Cyborg loses. I mean, I don't really say that very often in MMA where I'm like, I don't really know how somebody wins. But if you're predominantly a pot shotter, and she beat Bethe Correia, but this is not someone who's necessarily nearly as skilled as Cyborg Justino. I really think what you're going to see in this contest is it's going to be slow going at first, and I think you might see Cyborg frustrated in parts, but it's no mystery. It's like Khabib. They know he's going to come forward. The question is, what are you going to do about it? She's going to work on the outside, try to cut angles, try to blitz you at times. I think you're going to see the Cyborg that I've been talking about. Patient, smart, great footwork, good head movement, slipping jabs, attacking. If she needs to bring up the other portion of her game, she will. At that point, I think it'll be lights out. But on the feet, I expect her to be very competitive and over time basically overwhelm Holly Holm either to a decision or a late stoppage.
Well, there you go, guys. Follow the man on Twitter at LThomasNews. Of course, check out his shows, Monday Morning Analyst, Promotional Malpractice Live Chat, where you can obviously be part of it. Obviously, the Luke Thomas Show on Sirius XM Rush 93 Mondays through to Fridays at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. And look, I know you're going to have tremendous coverage for UFC 219, so make sure you guys subscribe to his YouTube channel. A lot of tremendously fantastic content there. Some not even MMA related. There's a lot of things that you cover. So as always, we appreciate your time. Phenomenal breakdowns of both fights. And have a fantastic holidays and Christmas. Always appreciate the time, Luke.
Same to you, boys. Hope to see you on the road in 2018.
All right, guys, there you go. Luke Thomas, so much fun having him on the program. A big staple of Submission Radio throughout the year. A great guy. Make sure to check out his multiple podcast shows. The guy's just doing so much. It's great to see the success that he's had in 2017. And as we wrap up the show for 2017, we thought we'd give our predictions for two main fights from UFC 219 and also take a little bit of time to say thank you and goodbye to everybody that's listened to the program. We'll kick this thing off by talking about Khabib Nurmagomedov versus Edson Barboza. Gaspar, I guess I'll sort of talk through this because for both of these fights, I had an incredibly tough time trying to pick who's going to win. I keep flip-flopping back and forth and keep trying to think about the factors that are going to impact these fights. When it comes to this
betting
fight,
addicts right now are just sweating through their shirts.
Yeah,
like, just give us the bet.
Yeah, betting addicts should be turning this off or just taking this with a grain of salt. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm just going to talk through it and tell everybody what it kind of comes down to for me. I'm still not confident in Khabib's striking. We saw what we saw at the Michael Johnson fight. I know Javier said what he said in the interview, and he's very confident with Khabib and his striking. But with Barboza being such a ferocious striker, such a dangerous man, I definitely see a scenario here where he shocks the world and possibly knocks Khabib out in this fight. I mean, Khabib has been so dominant, but you just don't know where he's at. Also, there's been a long layoff. We don't know how severe these weight cuts are, Casper. All this kind of stuff, just it would be silly for me to ignore the fact that Edson could go out there and possibly stop Khabib. I mean, I still think it's unlikely, but for me, it is a thought that lingers in my mind. However, when I do think about the most likely way this fight plays out, I do think Khabib will be using his wrestling to dominate this fight, take Barboza down, really wear him out, and possibly even finish this fight early on, maybe the first or second round. To me, that's the most logical sort of and likely way this fight could happen. But again, I hate doing these predictions because it's like I'm going, well, I think this guy's going to win, but there's a really, really high chance Edson Barboza is going to go out there and possibly shock the world. He's on a great run so far. Khabib's got a lot of stuff going against him. Let's not forget there's a lot of pressure on his shoulders as well. And I mean, I know there's pressure on Barboza's shoulders, but how great of a matchup is this for Barboza, really? I mean, going out there, co-main event spot, UFC 219 against a guy so highly touted like Khabib, and it's weak in an area where he's so strong. And I mean, if you're Barboza right now, you're taking this opportunity with both hands going forward and seeing what you can do. So for me, a lot of the pressure here is on Khabib. There's question marks around his weight. There's question marks around where he's at after this long layoff, physically where he's at after the issues that he's had when he went to Germany. And also what we saw with the Michael Johnson fight in the striking, I have questions about his striking. So in saying that, I still believe he's just so dominant with his wrestling. And as we know, wrestling is just such an important part of MMA. He's just so good that I do see him in my prediction, I'm going to predict to Khabib. I believe he'll try and take – well, not try. I think he'll break the distance down. He'll take Barboza down. He'll wear him out. He'll grind him out. And if that does happen, I predict that he'll finish him in the second round. But Casper, to you – did you have as much of a struggle putting this prediction together as I did?
Yeah, a little bit. I had to rewatch tape. And I think one of the things that you pointed out, I think that, and kind of like John Morgan said, like stylistically and skill-wise, you could certainly make the argument that a Khabib is, as John Morgan said, a slight cut above Barboza. But I think when you talk about the X factors, like you just mentioned, I think there are a lot more things going against Khabib than, say, Barboza. Like you mentioned, the momentum that Barboza's on, and no one's really questioning a lot of things about Barboza. I mean, you could arguably question his chin, but I don't really think Khabib's that guy to really test him in that area. I love Javier Mendez's honesty, where he's just like, basically, I don't know why Khabib did that, and I can't really guarantee that he's not going to do that again, and who knows, he's a fighter, fighters do this. I love that, and I almost feel like we, not specifically us, but maybe the media and a lot of people are partially to, not so much to blame, but maybe we sort of got in Khabib's head, because I remember UFC 205, before the Michael Johnson fight, we were asking him, not in these words, but essentially like, how are you going to grapple, Michael Johnson? Obviously, we weren't asking that, but all the questions were very much like, do you think you'll beat him on the ground? Do you think you'll submit him? Do you think you'll, wrestle fuck him, for lack of a better term? And I remember Khabib was kind of like, guys, just remember, I can striking too. Maybe, he's kind of saying like, maybe I'll knock him out. Maybe I'll do this. I can do it all. And maybe he felt like he needed to go out there and prove something to everybody, and I think pretty quickly he realized, okay, that might not be the best decision. So he can't do that in this fight. He can't take chances striking like he did against Johnson. He has to come forward straight away, immediately, and I think not let Edson set his feet and attack and uncork those brutal leg kicks, because, those leg kicks, they won't be as effective if Khabib keeps the close range. Barboza really needs space to operate at his best form, and, I'm curious, will Khabib's wrestling shut down the offense of Barboza? Because we have seen that happen to some degrees in past fights. Like Michael Johnson came very, very hard at Barboza, shut down a lot of his striking. Tony Ferguson managed to do that. Beneil Dariush had some success freezing Barboza's striking with forward pressure. But I guess the thing about those guys is they were all much better strikers than Khabib. They all had another threat, not just the takedown. Whereas Khabib is slightly one-dimensional, even though he's very, very good at that one dimension. If he does come forward sort of without a diverse threat and only goes for clinch attempts and takedowns, I can certainly see a scenario where Edson could chew him up. I mean, Edson's really good at circling away from the cage and returning to the center of the cage. He needs to stay within that little black octagon and in the center of the cage if he wants his most, the most success as possible. And I think a lot of strikers, they wouldn't risk throwing kicks against a strong wrestler. But with Edson, not only are they brutal and powerful and damaging, but they're so fast and there's so little wind-up that Khabib may not even have time to catch them. And, if Edson does damage Khabib's legs, Khabib may have a tough time exploiting takedowns or covering distance. So that's another thing that I could see. And we've seen it time and time again where you have a great wrestler, and if the first shot, even if it lands and they're not able to capitalize, the second one gets stuffed and then they start taking damage. I wonder if we'll see that moment where Khabib's confidence starts dwindling because he sees that these takedowns aren't coming as easily as he thinks, and Edson's sort of starting to gain confidence and starting to chew him up from the outside. And over the recent years, Edson's also become really good at countering takedowns with these short range attacks, like little elbows and that amazing flying knee that he hit Dariush with. And if Khabib sort of does get predictable and desperate and spams takedowns, I could definitely see Barboza timing him and hurting him very badly. So much like you, Dennis, I would not be surprised at all. I almost wanted to pick Barboza in this one, but honestly, I think it's a lot more likely that Khabib does take Barboza to the cage, takes him down from the clinch, and just basically goes to work. I think, I also think that when Khabib does do that, I don't think he should give him any more chances once he is down for the reasons that I outlined before. So I actually think Khabib via round one submission, I think he's going to try and get it done very quickly. And he knows he needs to make a statement here. He knows that if he wants to fight McGregor or even Tony Ferguson, he needs to really solidify his case. I don't think there's any time to screw around. So I think he'll do it in the first round. I think he'll make it quick. And then I'm really looking forward to hopefully him getting on the mic and, seeing what he says. UFC, give me your Irish chicken or something to that extent.
Yeah, I like it. I think the big thing here is, Khabib is Khabib's worst enemy here. And if he checks his ego at the door, if he does this efficiently and quick, this could end up very well. But if he decides, like you mentioned, to let Barboza get up and maybe, you know, gets a bit of confidence and decides to strike with him later on in the fight, things could end not so well for him. So we'll see what happens there. In the main event as well, I struggle to make a prediction. This is the battle that's going on in my mind. Holly Holm is just, you know, so great with movement. I see a scenario where she stays on the outside, picks her shots, waits till the later rounds with Cris Cyborg and really starts to turn it on with Cyborg sort of possibly getting a little bit tired and not being as effective. And Holly Holm, you know, being in as many great boxing battles, kickboxing battles that she's been in, you know, maybe using some of that experience, some of those times to sort of build her strategy for this fight and win this in a decision. But just like John Morgan mentioned, you just can't discount the power of Cris Cyborg and the fact that, you know, a lot of people do see her as kind of like the Mike Tyson of the female MMA fighting world. She's just so dangerous. The only thing there is, you know, I just wasn't very impressed with her performance over Tanya. We were down there at UFC 214. It was good to see her sort of take her time, measure things out, show us that she could hang in there. But I keep thinking about this in my mind, the fact that Holly Holm is just such a tough competitor. And I think back to all of Cris Cyborg's previous opponents who are very, very tough girls in their own right. But you could almost argue that Holly Holm is a number of levels above any opponent that Cris Cyborg has really had in the past. So we've seen Cris really, really dominant against a lot of these girls who, you know, aren't really at Holly Holm's level. How is she going to look against Holly Holm, who is just such a dominant boxer, such a good kickboxer, so good with her movements? It's not the same Holly Holm that we've seen. Obviously, her performance against Betch, you know, you'd think she'd go out there. You'd think she'd get it done sooner. It looked like, you know, there was, like Coach Winklejohn said, stuff going on in her personal life, stuff affecting her. It wasn't the Holly Holm that we possibly saw at the start of a UFC run. But I guess the big question around this is, where is Holly Holm mentally? What are these personal problems? You know, Coach Wink wouldn't really share what these personal problems were, but I'd be interested to find out what these personal problems were, how they impacted her, how much attention they took away from her when it came to training, how much it impacted her mentally when it came into fight time. And I'd love to know where she's at now, because if she's back to the old Holly Holm, I see a scenario where she wins this fight in a decision, a unanimous decision or a split decision over Cris Cyborg. But if this is the Holly Holm that we saw against Betch, if this is the Holly Holm that's sort of not quite there mentally, if these personal issues are still occurring, I do think Cris Cyborg would win this fight. So when it came down to making this prediction, it was incredibly difficult for me. But I'm just going to have to go with Cris Cyborg here. I do think she's pound for pound the best fighter in that division. And to me, I see possibly a very, very dominant win over Holly Holm. I'm just not quite sure we're seeing the same Holly Holm we once did. I think Holly Holm may be on a decline in her career. I'm not sure what it's really regarding about. She is getting on in age. She's past that mid-30s part in her life. She's had a lot of fights. She's had a lot of boxing fights. She's had a lot of kickboxing fights. And I'm not quite sure where she's at when it comes to her personal life. So I'm going to go with Cris Cyborg here. What about you guys? Did you struggle making this prediction as well?
Yeah, I think you made a lot of good points there, and I think this is a tough one. I know a lot of people are sort of sucked into believing that, you know, Cris is going to go out there and destroy Holly Holm and, you know, be as dominant as she was. But like you mentioned, Holly is a huge cut above Cyborg's previous competition. I like the point that you made about, you know, well, not really like, but I understand the point that you made about Holly Holm potentially being on a decline. It's, yeah, the interesting thing about, like, she's obviously had 3 back-to-back losses prior to the Betch win with Miocic Tate, Jermaine Durandamy, and Valentina Shevchenko. And I feel like, you know, it's interesting because she's so close to possibly being in the running as one of the best female fighters of all time, at least in MMA. If it wasn't for those losses, like you look at the Miocic Tate fight, she was winning dominantly, and then in the last minute or last round, she got choked out. But she was so close to winning that one. And then against Valentina Shevchenko, that was apparently when the problems were at their worst, the personal issues. So, you know, Coach Wink has many times said that she just didn't show up for that one. And then against Jermaine Durandamy, it's a fight that a lot of people thought that she won. So it's, I mean, I certainly understand the argument for why she might be on a decline. And like you mentioned, the Betch Cahill fight, you know, people thought that she would go out there and destroy someone like Betch, who really doesn't have high-level striking. So, I don't know, she's kind of between these two, between these two veils. I will say this, though, like, if you look at the matchup, Holly's a very extremely patient fighter, and obviously Cyborg seems to be getting more patient as she matures. We saw with Tanya Evinger, she didn't exactly go out there, and she wasn't able to put her away straight away. So I actually likely see this one going the distance, and I don't think either woman is really going to be forcing a finish, especially not Holly. You know, Cyborg has this style where she likes to patiently stalk her opponent, evade, and then once they attack, she likes to sort of move forward and counter them at the end of their attack. And Holly likes to obviously use that lateral movement and stay on the outside, use her side kicks to keep distance and counter while moving backwards and sort of wait for that perfect moment to counter. I definitely see Holly having a chin tested up against the cage and having some very close moments. And I know a lot of people are also talking about the cardio and is Cris really built to go 25 minutes? But that's the thing. Holly doesn't really put on, the most blistering pace or bring the most forward pressure. I think for a lot of it, Cyborg is going to be moving forward. She's going to be controlling the pace. It is no secret, though, obviously, how much Cyborg cuts, and so I expect Holly to have a game plan, like you mentioned, to sort of tire Cris out, maybe play the Matador, and take advantage in the later rounds. And those are actually the rounds that I'm the most excited for. I think that's where things are going to get really interesting. It is a really, really tough fight to pick. I could certainly see Holly picking apart a sort of slow down Cris in the later rounds, but I also believe Cyborg will be able to do enough damage early on and rack up enough rounds to sort of win a decision. It wouldn't surprise me at all. Maybe rounds 4 and 5, the momentum will start to swing to Holly's favor, but I think maybe rounds 1, 2, and 3, that's where Cyborg will be at the best, and I reckon Cyborg via majority decision.
Gonna be interesting. A lot of split predictions here, a little bit like the new Star Wars movie reviews. Yeah. People not quite sure what to go with.
Oh, and just to add on that, a lot of people talking about Holly Holm, and she doesn't really have the finishing power. She doesn't have. I mean, she's not known for the finishing power in her hands, but obviously she is in her kicks, and I think her best chance at finishing the fight and finishing someone like Cyborg would be with one of those sneaky kicks she's known for. She obviously dropped Jermaine Durandamy with that sneaky question mark kick. She knocked out Betch Kahea. She knocked out Ronda Rousey. I think that if she can get Cyborg lunging in like Cyborg often does, and if she can catch her with sort of one of those sneaky kicks and wrap it around the back of her head, I think that's her best chance maybe in the later rounds. But yeah, I'm still sticking to it. Cyborg via decision.
I love it. It's like we build the case for the person to win, but
go opposite.
You just can't go past that gut feeling and that prediction. So love to hear your guys' thoughts and your predictions in the comment section below under this YouTube video, or jump onto social media, Twitter @SubmissionAUS, or Facebook, facebook.com/SubmissionRadioAUS. Drop your predictions to us as well. I know it's a little while away, so you guys have a little bit of time to think about these predictions, but just go with your heart. There's no judgments here. We like predictions. Don't beat around the bush. Give us the one that you feel like is going to happen. Those are the predictions that we love.
And if you win money, share money with us, because God knows we need it.
Yeah, we need the money. Give us the money. Send us the money. Buy us luxurious things. We like yachts. We like boats. we like hats with feathers in them. Whatever you guys can come up with.
Yeah.
Send it over our way. But yeah, I mean, the last episode of Submission Radio for the year. As I look back over this year, Casper, I just think about how lucky we are to be doing this for another year and have so many great listeners, great supporters, so many guests coming onto the program. I know when we first started this show, it kind of felt like we were the new kids on the block. But now that we've been around for a number of years now, I almost start to feel like, wow, I can't believe we've been at this racket for so long. Can't believe someone turned a blind eye and has let us do this for so long.
We're like the Grizzly veterans. Now we've got 5 o'clock shadows and we're,
we call everyone kid.
Yeah, talking about how we've seen some things, been through some things. I feel like we're at, you get to that, when you're a kid, you tell people like how old you are and you add like and a half at the end. You're like, I'm 5 and a half. And then as you get older, you kind of try and avoid when people ask you like, how old you are. They're like, how old are you? And you're like, what's the time again? So we're kind of at that point where it's embarrassing to say how long we've been doing this for. But yeah, no, it's been another great year. Obviously, you doing a phenomenal job every week of lining up the guests, and that is a phenomenally hard, really, really, really difficult thing to do. And we're lucky to get all the amazing guests that we get. And like you mentioned, the amazing listeners, you guys right now tuning in, listening in. We know there's a lot of loyal people. I know some people, they'll listen on SoundCloud, but then they'll jump on YouTube just to give the video a like. That's something that just means the world to us. We've had a lot of amazing interactions, especially through the emails. You can email us at info@submissionradio.com. The lines will always be open. Sometimes it does take us a minute to get back to you guys. I think we have a bunch of emails that we need to write back to, but we always read them. We always appreciate them, and we will always get back to you guys. A lot of amazing iTunes reviews, a lot of amazing comments in the YouTube section. I love the YouTube section. It's not always the most positive. It's not always the most nice, but I get a kick out of it regardless.
Apparently people don't like Australian accents.
What?
Those Aussie guys.
How dare they? I like that. Even that cracks me up. I see some people who like, they only comment like once every like 3 months, but it's only ever to come on and like bag the Australian accent. So, you know, you like our regulars. It's like a thing we have. You may think we hate it, but actually we love it. Actually, we laugh a lot about it.
They should start saying positive comments, because then we'll start disliking them.
Yeah, exactly.
Keep it negative. We love it. No, I think there is a big misconception there, because, you know, people do give us a lot of negative stuff. And, you know, we just appreciate people that listen to the program, period. And a lot of that negative stuff, me and Casper, we just kind of read, we have a bit of a laugh about it. And, you know, we still appreciate the person taking the time to, I suppose, watch the video and write their comments. And a lot of those people that start off writing the negative comments to us at the beginning actually end up sticking on with us, hanging on with us, and becoming listeners in the long run as well. So it's kind of like a funny journey. I understand it too, because, you know, in this crazy world of MMA, you know, you kind of go, who are these guys to tell us, you know, what the predictions are and what should be happening, and interviewing these guys. And I think at the start, there's this whole level of, all right, guys, prove yourselves to us. Prove us that you deserve our listening time. And I think a lot of the people have enjoyed the content that comes out, and eventually sort of enjoy the boys at Submission Radio. Maybe even appreciate the Australian accents a little bit, because it's a little bit of something different, and I guess that's a good thing. I've got to quickly say as well, and Casper mentioning the phenomenal job I do, I'd be silly not to mention the amazing job Casper does on a weekly basis. Just an absolute joy to work with. The hardest working guy, one of the hardest working guys in the MMA world, and that's saying something. I mean, what you guys don't realize is behind the scenes, he does all the amazing editing, putting the shows together, the amazing thumbnails, the amazing work of running the YouTube page. You know, we transcribe a lot of interviews ourselves, and we do that together as well. And he's just, you know, an absolute machine. Sleepless nights. You know, we do this out of the passion for you guys, and behind the scenes, it's definitely a rocky ride a lot of the weeks. You know, we struggle getting the guests for you. Some weeks it's a last minute thing, you know.
It's like WCW Nitro back in the day. 10 minutes before show time, you look at me and you're like, what are you doing? And I look at you and I'm like, I don't know. I really don't know.
Pretty much. I mean, I'd lie if I didn't say that today. We're trying to do some extra interviews for you guys, and some of those didn't pan out. So a lot of work goes behind this show. The finished product is it's a weeks long work for Casper. It's him sitting down and editing a lot of these interviews, making sure the audio quality is right, making sure, you know, it looks beautiful for you guys on YouTube. And I have to applaud you, Casper, because I have to say, you know, a lot of great shows out there, but the production that you brought to Submission Radio this year in 2017, and I know it's an audio show that we put up on YouTube. We understand that, but the work that you've done to sort of brighten it up a little bit for the people that watch on YouTube, and include some fun images, sometimes videos, and other little graphics there, it's just been outstanding. So I have to say, you know, a big congratulations to you for 2017 as well. Very proud to be working with you still with Submission Radio.
I really appreciate that, man. I can't top what you just said. That's like an Oscar speech right there, but the feeling is absolutely mutual, man. And obviously I appreciate everything you do. And just going back to sort of some of those comments, you mentioned the negative comments. I actually don't feel like we get really many negative comments at all anymore. So, you know, trolls, what are you doing? Sleep on the job? Where you at? Well, I feel like, you know, we have sort of passed that point where people sort of, you know, have that appreciation. And even if people think like, fuck these cunts, they kind of appreciate, all right, well, they work hard. So I'm you know, gonna let that. And you know, you mentioned sort of a lot of the interviews that we do, and sort of that stage of proving yourself. I tell you what, like, I'm not gonna speak for you, but I'm pretty sure it's the same for you. Like, I still feel like I'm a student of the game. I still feel, I think I've always had this thing where, because we don't have that journalism background, we didn't go to journalism school, and, you know, we don't have the fancy degrees. I've always felt that sense of not being good enough, and felt that we've had to prove ourselves extra hard. And so every time I watch any interview, it doesn't matter whether it's, you know, say an Ariel Helwani interview or a Luke Thomas interview, or even nothing to do with even MMA, just random interviews here and there, I watch it with a sort of I can't help but try and soak in, you know, what the interviewer's doing, why they're doing it, why they're asking these questions. I still, to this day, like, you know, we'll finish an interview and sometimes I'm like, I want to change so many things about that, and I use that sort of for the future. And I'm sure you have that as well, Dennis, you know, where we're constantly learning. And people have sort of said recently, like, you know, we see your styles evolving. I mean, remember the tap out round? What happened to the tap out round? I feel like
we've got to bring it back one day, though. I love. We ran out of questions, guys. We had a lot of the same people on. We couldn't come up with enough good questions for the tap out round. That was every interview thing. Every interview there'd be a tap out round.
Submission Radio marketing team ran away again, and this time we didn't find them they ripped off their tags, their location tags. Yeah, we just can't find it. So we need to find a new marketing team. But I think that's something that we used to do that was really fun. And I'd love to do that, but I feel like the style of interviewing now that we do, we try and find out as much information as possible as what's happening, sort of today. And so like, I'd love to ask people, what's your favorite flavor of ice cream, or what movie do you like? But sometimes there just isn't really time, when you've had someone for like 25 minutes and you can see that, they're being polite, but they're like, I want to get the fuck off the phone, you guys. You said 15 minutes and it's been 26. There's not really much time for a tap out around. But yeah, I think that's just sort of another show, and another, I guess, notch in the, constant progress of our interviewing and our, whatever you want to call it, interviewing skills. And yeah, I'm excited to come back next year. We're coming back January 17th, and the show's back on the road. We're taking a bit of a cheeky break, obviously, to see our families. Dennis, you're going up to Adelaide for New Year's.
I'm doing a road trip with some pets, booking Airbnbs for pet. They say pet friendly, and then they lie to you. Can you believe it, guys? Unbelievable. So I've had to have some harsh words with some middle-aged or really old Airbnb owners who didn't want young Winston, my poodle cross Shih Tzu Maltese, to come on the road with me. Can you believe it?
How could they not want Winston? Everybody wants Winston. That's
unbelievable. We'll get Winston on the show to talk about it at some point, but I mean, we're back. We'll be back then. It's been a really fun year, Casper. I mean, we love everybody. We love everybody coming on. We love everybody that comes on the show. It gives us the time. I know a lot of people will go, well, how come the interview was only 15 minutes? And you guys have to understand.
It was supposed to be 10, and we squeezed that another 5 minutes.
Yeah, we squeeze stuff. We're like a place that squeezes fresh juice daily, except it's in the form of MMA interviews. We start with 10 minutes, we work it to 15, and we build it from there. But a lot of these guests, they do it out of the goodness of their hearts and out of the extra time of their day. And we've had countless fighters come on during their training camps when they're super, super busy. And I'm talking about UFC champions, stuff like that. So we appreciate that.
Sometimes
we appreciate all the MMA.
Weeks and months to get someone on. It's like weeks and months of them saying no, no, no. And then eventually they're like, all right. It's like Lenny and Carl, like, come on, and then we know you were in, and then we squeeze the minutes out.
Yeah, that's right. So it's a crazy process. I think we can do a whole show one day we can do a whole show just based on what goes behind the scenes with submission rate. There's so many crazy stuff that you guys don't know. There's so many crazy stories that people don't know about some of the recordings that we've had and some of the stuff that hasn't been released that we'll be able to talk to you guys about one day. I think we'll make a really, really fun show. But for now, we're wishing you guys a really, really happy Christmas, Ramadan, Hanukkah, New Year, whatever you guys celebrate. Make sure you have a great time. I know.
Just eat a lot of food. That's what it's
eat
all
a lot
about.
of food. I know Casper's a little bit stressed because he's putting together a very fun menu for his family for Christmas there as well. So it's going to be some good food going on.
It's like the show. I don't know what's on the menu. I'm gonna have to wing
it. maybe Francis Ngannou will be on the menu. You never know. Maybe. You never know what's going to be happening. I have to just remind you guys to jump on YouTube, give us your subscription, give us your comments below, jump on social media, and give us your thoughts. Stay in touch with us over this break. Even though we're not going to be doing an episode, we still love hearing from you. Obviously, UFC 219 happening around that time. So whatever you guys have going on, still keep in touch. We love talking to you guys. And if, like Casper said, if we don't get back to you right away, you're still in our minds, and we will get to you as soon as we can.
Yeah. In the meantime, guys, happy holidays, happy New Year, because we won't be speaking to you around New Year's. And I know, Dennis, you'll be somewhere in the middle of nowhere on the road around that time. But I'll be watching. I'm sure you'll watch UFC 219 from some kind of I don't know. Russian, not Russian stream, but like some old Russian TV somewhere that just gets the channel.
It's going to be like WrestleMania 17, the opening scene where there's like the Eskimos crowded around a black and white TV. That's going to be me in little Australia somewhere.
I'll be in my backyard. We got a new sound system in the backyard on the decking, so I'll be watching UFC 219. The reason why I'm saying this is make sure you give us your sexy tweets at SubmissionAUS. We'll be watching the fights live. It's going to be a lot of fun. In the meantime, well wishes for everybody. Happy New Year, Merry Christmas, happy celebrations, happy holidays, and we'll be seeing you on January 17. Stay safe.